Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the first KaiMoCast episode in a long time. I'm sorry about that. But I have a very special guest who not only is the first guest in a while, but he is my first returning guest, but he is also the very first guest I have ever had on the podcast, Captain McKay Random. Why don't you say hello to the audience?
Hello. It feels good to be involved in so many firsts, and I'm glad that I could be a part of the big comeback show here.
Oh yeah, it's we're making all kinds of promises here.
Delivery is not my strong point, but I'll try.
Yeah, it's something I ought to work on. So just because I can't guarantee how long we'll be going and that everyone will watch, Cap, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone what you're doing and where they can find you?
Well, I am a action figure enthusiast, stop motion animator. Do a lot of videos on my YouTube channel, Captain McKay Random, that are involved in that hobby in some degree, whether it's animation or building a diorama or, just kind of talking about different figures and things here and there. It's pretty much all about that kind of hobby thing. Feel free to check it out. I'm at Captain McKay on Instagram. I post little stop motion clips there and basically more of the same. So if that's what you're into, by all means, come and visit.
And all of that, if you don't want to type anything out, that'll all be down below with easy clickable links that take no time at all. It's definitely worth your time to watch his stuff. Cap, you have done some really great stuff.
Thank you.
On both YouTube and Instagram. It's really good stuff.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Instagram is actually like a fairly recent thing for me to be like just doing animation on, because it's easy to get like shorter clips and put them on there as opposed to YouTube, where like people might just bypass like a 30-second stop motion clip because they're just like, man, like by the time you get through the ad and everything else, it's just not even going to be worth seeing. But Instagram, it's eye-catching if you're just scrolling and suddenly, hang on, this is a stop motion thing. What's this? Mm-hmm. And it seems, I don't know, it's been pretty good for me. Like the King Kong ones I've been posting little by little seem like people are into those, so that's always cool.
Well, I'm definitely into those. Those are really good.
Gotta still finish that up. I started doing a little more on it last night, so hopefully this week I'll be able to get back into it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So on the docket, we're going to be talking about a couple movies and a TV show, and if we have time, maybe another movie or two. But a good chunk of the time, I think, will be dedicated to talking about just a lot of action figures that have been announced, revealed, and released. Because, man, Cap and my wallet will tell you there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm preparing for, a pretty, like, I don't know, just a heavy damage on the wallet, bank account. Probably not much in the pantry as far as food. We're going to go straight back to tuna fish and rice and cheap whatever.
It's all you got to do. So we'll be talking about some Monster Arts, some Storm Collectibles, some NECA, and two small little Hasbro developments that have come out over the last month or two. Cap, I think you know what those are.
Definitely interested to get talking about some of that stuff.
Yeah, so the first movie we're going to talk about is the now famous, I'd say, Godzilla vs. Kong. This is one of those movies that obviously someone like you and I were excited for just by default. You being us both being big King Kong Godzilla fans, it's just kind of a movie that makes sense, and also being a remake, a pseudo remake of King Kong versus Godzilla, the classic rematch, East versus West, and it's, I don't know, I was really hyped for it. I had my reservations, but just overall, I was hyped for it.
Yeah, me too. Like, I was in the same kind of position, like, leading into it, where you knew it was coming, but you really didn't see anything or hear anything. Like, you'd get a little bit of, like, maybe some, like, speculation or rumors or something. But then the trailer hit in January, and that was really, like, kind of the first you've really seen of anything from the movie. And then I think it was out, like, in April. So, like, between your first impression all the way up to, like, by the way, here's the movie, it was only a couple of months, and they did a good job, I think, with that time. And like you say, too, it's kind of like like a reimagining of the classic like 62, I believe, movie. And it's not something that I ever really expected to see again, because it's like licensing rights and all that kind of stuff. Or
I mean, King Kong is one of those characters where it feels like everybody has had a chance to make a Kong adaptation. Like everyone has had a chance to put their own fingerprint, if you will, on the Kong IP.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, you've seen like a lot from different movie studios and cartoons and comics and different things, almost to the point, I think, where like nobody really knows who like owns Kong, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So like, so I honestly didn't think that we would have ever seen something like this again until they started with the MonsterVerse, and then it seemed like they were building towards it. But I mean, just knowing how much of a legal like nightmare that had to be to pull it off, I was like, okay, well, I'm glad they're doing it. And not only that, but like after seeing the movie, I think probably the majority of people who saw it would tell you it delivered.
Exactly. I mean, this is one thing I'm really interested in, is how just history is going to remember this movie, if you will. That's kind of a cliched way of putting it. But, this was, a year into the pandemic, and like nothing came out for like 9 months, something like that. Like Tenet came out, but that was the only movie that tried to get people back in theaters, and for the most part, I think it failed. I have some serious problems with that movie, and I'm not too big a fan of it. So, but Godzilla versus Kong is one of those, like, because it just came out of nowhere and it was just dumb fun you didn't have to think about. I think that's why so many people were excited for it.
I think that's part of it. Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, having the option to either see it in a theater or just watch it at home, I think that might have been one of the first group of movies that did that, because there was a bunch of them that came out around that time that were like, if you want to go to the theater, great. If you want to stay home, that's fine too. You're going to be able to see it the same day. Like, you're not going to have to wait. None of that. So just giving the option was a good move for that, in my opinion. And then when, like, what the movie actually brought to the table was like you say, it's big, fun, monster movie, like chaotic, fast paced, and you're in and out in 2 hours. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't, it doesn't try and take itself too seriously, which I think some people can say that about like the 2014 movie, which I didn't mind that it was kind of a little bit more, bleak in tone. I think that worked for that movie.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, yeah, the MonsterVerse is one of those things where like it started one way and like left off completely differently than it started tonally, which I don't mind again. But yeah, it's like I never would have seen the evolution coming of like 2014, where everything is kind of very grounded in real world setting, to like now Kong versus Godzilla, where we have like hovercrafts and like a different planet inside the Earth, like all that kind of stuff.
It's like the 90s Batman. Michael Keaton is the first one is great. It's dark and gritty, well, comparatively at the time, but
yeah,
it redefined what superhero movies were, and then Batman Returns kept that for the most part. It added some comedy to it, and then Batman Forever and Batman and Robin just were like, what? Just complete tonal whiplash.
It just went in the opposite direction. But yeah, so I mean, as Godzilla versus Kong goes, like I mean, it's been quite a few months now since it came out. I did see it on whatever HBO Max when it came out that first day, and about a month ago, I got to go to a friend's wedding, and one of the movies on the flight was Kong versus Godzilla. So I'm like, oh, perfect, get to watch it again, kind of without all the expectation and the hype and everything, because I'd already seen it. So I'm like, I just want to watch it again and just have fun, see if there's anything I missed the first time around. And you know what? I still had a great time.
Even on a tiny airplane screen.
Yeah, watching it just on my laptop with their Wi-Fi. I'm like, yeah, cool. Like, it's good. I liked it. Still.
Bit of an off topic, but you mentioned wedding. I know Burnout Inc. just got married. So congratulations to Chase.
Yep, big time, big moves. That was a good time going out there, and I wish I had taken more video, honestly, because we went to a bunch of cool places and saw all figures and different things, and went to an arcade and stuff. But, you know, when you're busy kind of just like hanging out and having fun, you don't always think to just pull the phone out and start recording. So that's on me. But, hey, it was a good time.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not always about getting the B-roll.
Yeah, definitely.
But so we talked about the build up to Godzilla versus Kong. What did you? I know you talked about this on your podcast episode with the 616 Entertainment podcast, where you and Mountain Man covered for Ian. You were like,
"Oh yes,
I don't want Kong to be smithing his axe. I don't want Kong to do this. I don't want him to be signing with people." You talked a little bit about what your concerns and what you wanted to happen were. So for people who haven't seen that episode or haven't watched it in a long time, what were your hopes and dreams and concerns with the movie?
I think if I remember correctly, way back then when the first trailer came out, when it was revealed Kong just kind of has like the big axe that he would end up using in the movie, we were like, all right, how are they going to pull this off? Like, we've seen Kong in Skull Island, like, grabbing things and using them as weapons, and so, like, he obviously has that capability. But then when it's an axe, it's not just something he picks up off of the ground. Well, I mean, I guess in the movie technically it is, but, you know,
it's
that was made...
naturally occurring.
Yeah, it's not something that you would just find laying around, you know? Like, so some other Kong ancestor, I guess, we're meant to believe, made that, and I was like, I don't know. Are we going that far with it? But in the movie, like, they did enough of it where it was ambiguous enough where it didn't bother me at all that was going on. And they put in, like, the minimal amount of effort that's required for me to just be like, okay, I'm with you. Like, when they had the scene where they're like, oh, they're all naturally drawn back to the Hollow Earth because they all have this, like, internalized, like, almost pre-programmed memory of, like, their past, essentially. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's good enough for why Kong knows what this axe is and he knows how to use it, because they've said it's like on a, you know, almost like a metaphysical level. They just all inherently know. Yeah, is it dumb? Sure. But at least they explained it that little bit where the audience can be like, okay, I got it.
Well, it's also grounded in some reality. And they mentioned, too, what's his name? Alexander Skarsgård, or whatever the Skarsgård in this movie is. He compares the traveling or the instinct that the Titans have to bird migration or salmon migration, and so having that just real world connection can be like, yeah, I can see how that applies to these giant monsters. So that also helps kind of make it acceptable, or at least probable.
So there's like that little bit of more biological kind of grounding in it too. Oh, okay, so that's, yeah. I mean, but like I said, that's all you need. Just a little bit of explanation, and then you know, an audience member like me who's just kind of in there to have fun. Like, that's all I need to just be able to go along with it and just enjoy the ride.
Exactly. So this is definitely a turn your brain off movie. It gives you explanation, so you're not just completely just blind going in, or just like blindfolded and having to have your hand held to make sure you don't fall. But it's still got some internal consistency and logic within the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was kind of like different plots running throughout it concurrently, where I think were better than others for me personally. Like the Kong subplot, where his like human like team, I guess, that kind of like hangs out with him and like looks after him, they understand, like, right, if we leave him too long like unprotected, Godzilla's going to sense him and come after him, and they're going to fight and all this stuff. Like, Godzilla's been kind of going around basically like claiming that he is the alpha predator by going around and like beating all these other monsters and everything. So they know that's going to happen. So kind of the race against the clock to get Kong where they need him to be in order to get to the Hollow Earth and do all that stuff, with at the same time trying to avoid Godzilla. I was like, all right, that's cool. And these people are likable enough, I think, to keep me I mean, not necessarily interested in everything they're doing because these are human characters in a kaiju movie, so it's like, yeah, okay. But like, I think they're far more interesting to me than the Godzilla team of like Millie Bobby Brown and the conspiracy theory guy and
Exactly.
Was it Fire Fist from Deadpool 2?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, like that was one of my like not gripes, but just one of my kind of like more surprising things about this movie, where like the guy's he's making his like conspiracy podcast about the company he works for, and not only does the company just not realize that he's doing this somehow, but the movie was framing him to be like the guy who's right about everything. I'm like, wait, really? He's our baby face in this? Like, you can't be serious. Like, I'm like, that's any other movie, this would be like the weird side character who's giving you red herrings and not actually right about anything. But in this one, they made a bold choice there. And I don't know. For me, I was like, all right, I can do without this guy.
Yeah, that subplot with the humans is just kind of, that's my biggest gripe with the movie. I think the Godzilla following with Millie Bobby Brown and Brian Tyree Henry and Josh. I can't remember the actor's name, but yeah, that trio. Yeah, I don't feel very good about that subplot. I mean, where it leads to at the end is, with Mechagodzilla is cool and all, but just the journey getting there was, yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, we got there. That's the important part. Like the scenes with like, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the bad guy who's just very obviously
Walter
the bad
Simmons.
guy.
Walter Simmons.
Walter. Okay, yeah. Like you get one look at this guy and you're like, oh yeah, there's our main antagonist, and him basically just bankrolling Mechagodzilla because he wants to just put mankind back at the top of the food chain. He's like, we'll just kill Godzilla and do it. It's like, all right, decent enough like motivation, I guess. That's it's all you need. Again, it's like, it's in there. It's good enough. Let's go. It's going to lead to more monster fights. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of monster fights, why don't we jump on into some of those, because that's kind of, I mean, the main highlight of the movie, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
What did you think of the aircraft carrier fight in the Tasman Sea, or whatever it's called?
I thought that was good. I mean, like, in a fight where Kong is so obviously outclassed, they still did a good job of making him look like strong. Mm-hmm. Like at the end of that fight, like
he's tired, man.
Yeah, he's had a hell of a day right there. But like they also made it a point to kind of show like, well, okay, he's essentially a sea monster, so like in the water he's going to have like a huge advantage, and Kong, there's no land around. He's kind of very limited to what he can do. Mm-hmm. So they're like, okay, Godzilla, he comes in with the advantage. Plus, they did make it a point to show that Kong was like tranquilized to some degree. So, if you want to put that in there for reasons why Kong didn't win or whatever, it's like they give you enough. So if you're a fan of either monster, you can pretty much have an argument about like, oh, okay, well, which one's better, which one won, lost, etc. But the way they did it, I thought it was really good. I mean, like, I liked the fight itself where Godzilla's kind of like stalking him throughout the water, and everybody knows he's coming, but nobody can really do anything about it. And what happens? I
mean, he's basically the shark in Jaws for like the first half of the fight. I mean, they directly reference it. One of the anchors on one of the battleships that he destroys catches on his tail, and Godzilla's dragging it the same way the shark in Jaws is dragging the barrels, and then he goes underwater, and they're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, that's right. That was good. But yeah, like it did the thing that a lot of the I think most of the MonsterVerse movies did, but also like, just kind of a lot of these kaiju movies where like the heroic monster always somehow ends up needing help from human beings. Like they've done this, I think, in every MonsterVerse movie, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. So like in Skull Island, the humans help Kong, and in King of the Monsters, like it's what's her name? The lady like sacrifices herself to be able to do the thing with the orca.
Yeah.
paraphrasing, but
and the nuke with Sarazawa.
Yes, exactly. So pretty much that's, I mean, if that's not directly spelling for you that Kong is the good guy here, then that's, that's look no further than these other movies. But yeah, so that's kind of a trope, and to an extent it works, I guess. But other than that, like the fight scene itself, like when they actually did go toe to toe, and they showed the scenes from the commercial and the movie trailer where they're like Kong's punching him on the aircraft carrier, and Godzilla hits him back, and Kong kind of like shoulder presses him into the water again. And like that's all cool. The fighting underwater was cool. Like you could see the desperation kind of, because Kong realizes like, oh, I can't breathe under here. This is no good. But and then how they ended it, I thought was actually pretty clever, because Godzilla, it's kind of a callback to King of the Monsters, where you first see him in the water and the guy's just like, no, like turn all your defenses off, open the window, let him see that we're not a threat, and then he pretty much left him alone after that. So yeah, it's like the intimidation display all over again. As soon as you stop trying to intimidate Godzilla, he's going to leave you alone, and that's kind of what happened here. Yeah,
one thing about the ending that I was talking about this with my dad when we were discussing it after we first watched it. The scientist is like, we need to find some way to save Kong, as Godzilla is pulling him deeper and deeper into the ocean. How about depth charges? Oh yeah, because depth charges will completely harm Godzilla, but Kong will be absolutely fine. I mean, he's basically impervious to depth charges. It's like, really? How does that hurt Godzilla more than Kong? It's just one of those, like, did they think about this, like, at all?
I don't know. Was Rebecca Hall there on that island, like, doing depth charges just to see if Kong would react? Like, just like, let's try this today and see if he's bothered by it. Oh, okay. Yes. Good to know. We'll keep that in our pocket.
A fleshy ape compared to an armored lizard that knows how to survive underwater. Yeah, depth charges. I see the logic in that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, they're like, oh, it'll just disorient Godzilla, and he'll just like let Kong go, basically, because he'll be like in a funk, I guess, or in a haze. And I'm like, oh, yeah,
it'll incapacitate
sure.
Kong.
Yeah. It probably wouldn't have done him any favors either. He might be like thinking he's swimming up to the top, and he's just going down into the bottom. Like, who knows? Like, if they're that like disoriented. But yeah, I don't know. But it was a fun fight scene overall. Like, again, you got to go with like big dumb movie logic. But yeah, like that was cool, and it gave you a good impression of things to come.
Yeah, and this is the one of those, like, what do you call it? Like, highlight reel of the movie, because the CGI throughout the whole movie, with one or two exceptions, is just fantastic. I mean, we reached this point in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where CGI looked impeccable, and still does, for the most part. But then I think after 2014 Pacific Rim, it just kind of looked like a video game. Like the Pacific Rim Uprising trailer, I feel like should have a PS4 logo at the end, because of how just like weightless everything feels. It doesn't feel like it has any impact or any weight. It feels like a video game. But with this movie, I think we're finally out of that or starting to get out of that sort of phase of video game graphics, cutscenes and cinematics and all that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially with this movie where I can't remember much of this happening in the previous movies, but they weren't afraid to show these monsters fighting in the middle of the daytime, like, so they don't have to hide behind nighttime and rain and all this kind of stuff constantly to just kind of protect their CG. They're confident enough and good enough at it to pull it off, where they're like, yeah, we'll just make it happen in the middle of the day. That's fine. We can make it look good. And in my opinion, they definitely delivered.
Absolutely. And it's probably one of the best looking movies of the year. I don't think it's going to be nominated for any Academy Awards, but I hope it gets nominated for Best Visual Effects, because, I mean, come on, man. I can't think of any movie that has this good of visual effects.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head either. Like, out of the ones I've seen, like, nothing's really coming close.
Mm-hmm. So, the second fight, well, I guess it's kind of... It's weird how they phrase it, because they phrase it as round 2 goes to Kong, but that's from Kong going from the Hollow Earth to Hong Kong, and then him slamming the axe into Godzilla's head. That they phrase that as round 2. What did you think of that fight?
I like that one too. I mean, that's the one where they show like Godzilla basically trying to like spam the atomic beam at him like the whole time, and Kong's like dodging it by like running around from building to building, and kind of like we see that Kong is very agile and like probably a lot faster than we expected him to be maybe in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I like that. And then at the end of the round, I guess, where it's that spot from the trailer where Kong is like blocking the atomic beam with the axe, and then he goes and swings it at Godzilla. And I think earlier on in the fight, actually, he catches Godzilla in the leg with it, and that's when we first see that Godzilla's like hurt by it, and that's like kind of the first time we've ever seen Godzilla like bothered by anything in this movie. So like that sells the axe. It's like, oh wow, okay, this is actually like something that he has to watch out for. So seeing Kong come down, swing on it. Of course, I think he connects in the chest or in the shoulder or something. So he did not see Infinity War. He did not go for the head. And so they must not have had it on the Skull Island. So I get it. But
cable is expensive.
I heard, yeah, there's something about that. But I like that fight was cool. I definitely had a good time watching that.
Yeah, and like you said, Kong is swinging around, and it shows that he's more in his element, where there are things to climb and to take into the air, where he has a bit more control. You know, on the ground, I think for the most part, on the ground, they're pretty even. Obviously, Godzilla has supremacy in the water, but Kong, just because he's much more agile, I think he definitely has air supremacy, at least for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you kind of saw like in that first fight with the aircraft carriers. Like, Kong is showing some sense of like agility by being able to like go from one to the other, and like he's making the best use of the ground that he has to use. So like now that he actually has like a surface and all kinds of things to climb on, he's doing a good job just dodging Godzilla's attacks and being able to at one point like sneak up on Godzilla and like jump on his back and stuff. Like, so yeah, I mean, seeing him in his element like that a little more was definitely cool.
Yeah, that's it. It also sells that he's, again, he was under some sedation in the aircraft fight, or the aircraft carrier fight, but he's like fully healed. He's got the axe, so they're at a level playing field, so you're able to pull for him a little bit more. It isn't Tien versus Cell where he's completely outmatched, and it allows you to root for him a little bit more easily.
Yeah, definitely.
So technically the third round, but it's pretty much just Hong Kong Part 2, is where Godzilla kills Kong. How do you feel about that, being the Kong person that you are?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what happens to Kong at the end of all of his movies. He just dies because he falls off of something or whatever. So like, I pretty much wait for that in a Kong movie. But in this one, like he gets like to the edge of death, and they shock him back to life with the Heave aircraft carrier. And like, for me, that was kind of cool, just because if you want to look for the Easter egg, it's like supercharging him with electricity. And I'm like, okay, just like Toho Kong. Got it, cool. And he comes and he puts his own like arm back into the socket. And at that point, we've got another fight going on already. But that's that was kind of one of the things where, like, when I was first watching the movie, it didn't dawn on me like how much time had passed between the end of the second round and the beginning of this one, because it seems like the sun is coming up now, and like at least some time has passed, because by the time Mechagodzilla comes out, it's already like daylight.
Yeah.
So there had been some time which passed, which I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad they didn't dwell on that too much, because it would have just been monsters laying around not doing anything for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what happens. Godzilla took one on Kong. He basically like submitted him in as many words, and Kong revived once again by the humans, because that's what happens to good guy kaijus.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, an enjoyable fight. It did finally, like, you got to see Godzilla be like a little bit out of his own like character in a lot of ways, where he's down on all fours, like kind of crawling around. We've never seen that out of Godzilla at any point in any movie, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Or at least not as deliberately as that. I think 98 had a couple shots of him on all fours, but not to the same extent as this movie.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. I haven't seen 98 in forever, but that's, yeah. Like, so this side of Godzilla is not something that we see much of then. And, they did a good job once again with, like, injuring Kong to make it so he doesn't just, like, get beat. Like, they still keep him looking strong, but then he falls out of the air when he gets hit with the atomic beam. He, like, separates his shoulder, and so little by little you can see the things adding up, and Kong eventually is unable to fight anymore, and Godzilla takes him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, as a movie monster fight goes, that was really good. You got a lot of that in a movie called Godzilla versus Kong. They don't avoid Godzilla versus Kong, which is great. It's really, yeah, like that's something that like a lot of the versus movies, sometimes you don't get to that until the very end, and I don't want to say you're disappointed, but you're just like, wow, that's not as big of a plot point as I thought it was going to be. But this one, they're like, no, we know why you're here. Here you go.
Yeah. One thing I want to bring up is, especially with that second round fight, is just how good the sound design is. I don't know how much you paid attention to that, but there are so many just like crunches and just like impacts that sound so good, especially in a theater. Godzilla chomping down on Kong's toes and biting on his toes, Kong hitting Godzilla in the head, all the slices on Kong's chest when Godzilla's scratching at him, and dislocating his shoulder. Like, there are just so many good sounds that just make this fight so much better.
I picked up on a little of it, but I'm going to have to go back and check it out now and just listen out for like the kind of more specific things. But yeah, sound design in general in this was really good. Like, all the energy effects and it's almost like every time they're hitting each other, it's like a sonic boom, like subwoofer going off. Like it's kind of like the opposite of what you were saying about like some of the weightlessness of previous CG in some of these movies. Like this one, everything these guys do just feels huge, and that's, I think, why it works so well.
Exactly. This movie feels big.
Yeah, definitely. Especially like with all the destruction that they leave behind too. Like they show, and that's kind of like going all the way back to like 2014, where like they're not hesitating to show you like just how much collateral damage is happening at the same time, like buildings getting destroyed and all the stuff you want to see in a big kaiju movie, all destruction and everything.
Exactly. I think it's kind of almost to the detriment a little bit, because I feel like some of the buildings in Hong Kong just like respawn, because Godzilla's beam is literally just slicing through it like a lightsaber, and then it's like he only destroys like 5 or 6 buildings with it, but then when he fights Mechagodzilla, he's getting like swung around like a cartoon, just going through buildings and dozens of buildings. So one, I guess, negative with the Hong Kong fights that you just don't really, at least this is a negative for me, I don't really get a sense of how big the destruction is, just because everything gets destroyed, but there's still more, if that makes sense.
I can see what you're saying. I mean, like, I always kind of, I guess if I ever really thought about it, I was like, well, Godzilla moves on to a different part of the city by the time Mechagodzilla and him meet. But yeah, I mean, with the amount of damage that was happening in that first fight, I think even the farthest reaches of the city probably would have shown at least some impact of what was going on.
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned the big MG. What did you think of the Mechagodzilla fight with Godzilla and Kong?
I thought it was cool. Like, I mean, they showed early on when they first showed Mechagodzilla, they basically showed that he's like able to do like, you know, just like he's doing the Godzilla move where he like opens the thing's mouth and like blasts the beam down the thing's throat. I'm like, oh, okay, they did their homework on Godzilla because they watched the Muto fight from the other movie, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then like later on in the fight, he's gonna go do it to Godzilla, and I was like, oh no, that's, you know, in wrestling, you never want the guy to use your move on you. That's just, you know, embarrassing.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, before that, like Mechagodzilla comes out, and they do a great job showing that Mechagodzilla is a problem here because Godzilla's just getting dragged at this point. Now, again, Godzilla just went through like fighting overnight, you know, with Kong, and that wasn't exactly an easy victory for him. So you got to admit he's probably a little tired at this point. But you know, this fight with Mechagodzilla is just like Mechagodzilla like pushing his head through all the buildings and like using those like claw machine hands he has to like kind of like flip him around and toss him all over the place. I was like, even like King Ghidorah in the last movie, I don't remember seeing Godzilla ever look so like ragdoll, you know?
Grappled. He's never been grappled before like this.
That's true. Like that's what I was kind of like thinking going into this movie, is because that would be, you know, at the time when everyone was kind of speculating what this movie was going to be, and I was like, oh, that's right. Kong is just like a physical fighter. Like, yeah, King Ghidorah's got like storms and lightning and all this stuff, and they do get physical, but like Godzilla in this context, this universe, he's never fought another monster that's just going to punch him in the head over and over. So like, I'm curious to see how they do that. And I think they did it really well. And, you know, I know we talked about all the Kong fights, but now Mechagodzilla is basically doing the same thing. He's got like what is that thing? Like, it's almost like a hydraulic press thing that just keeps hitting him over and over. Mm-hmm. It's like ridiculous the amount of weaponry this thing has.
Oh, it's like comparing it to Pokemon. Godzilla is like a water type. He knows how to fight against electric types, wind types, fire types, but he doesn't know how to fight against I'm gonna cave your skull in types like Kong.
Yep. Yeah, basically. I always thought, like, and this was my own, like, headcanon that I made up back when King of the Monsters was coming out, but I was like, oh, okay, so they're taking the main monsters and making them, like, almost elemental. So, like, Godzilla's water, Kong would be earth, Mothra's, like, air, Rodan's fire, and Ghidorah's, like, electric. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's a cool idea. They didn't really touch on it much in the movies, so I'm just like, oh, okay, maybe I'll use it somewhere. But like,
after
then
that, part 2.
There you go, confirmed. But then you got Mechagodzilla, who's like the man-made version, and he tries to like take
metal type.
Yeah, metal type. Yeah, he takes like all of the kind of like all the best of all the worlds, because you do get that callback from the last movie where it's like, yeah, they're actually kind of using the severed King Ghidorah head as like almost like an uplink to be able to control Mechagodzilla, which ends up biting him at the end of it. But yeah, like, that was cool. I just liked seeing that fight between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, and then Kong coming in and like doing the 2-on-1 fight at the end with the teamwork. Mm-hmm. I was like, all right, these guys learned enough about each other in the course of fighting all night long that they know how like these attacks work, and they do that little thing at the end where Godzilla supercharges Kong's axe so that Kong can kill Mechagodzilla, essentially. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's cool. Godzilla knows. He's like, hey, I got hit with that thing before and it was the worst, so I'm going to let Kong do that to this guy, and he's going to find out how bad it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was fun, though.
A lot of people compare this to BVS with, like, oh, they only fought for like 5 minutes and then they teamed up. The difference with this and BVS is that there's an actual clear victor. Like, it's undeniable that Godzilla won. Sorry, Cap.
No, it happens.
it's undeniable that Godzilla is the objective winner of the fight. With BVS, it's like, yeah, Batman won, but Martha, Lois Lane, what? As I kind of like BVS as a small guilty pleasure, but there's the winner of that fight is just so ambiguous.
It's like they went in not wanting to take a chance at like upsetting anybody, and like I don't know why they thought they would upset anybody by having a winner between the two characters that you're telling us in the title of the movie are going to fight. So they didn't make that mistake this time around, which is good. And then even in losing the initial fight, Kong still comes back and looks strong at the end. Like he gets his heat back by killing Mechagodzilla essentially. So like, even if you're a Kong fan like I am, you can. Some people I understand, by the way, are going to be still making excuses like he didn't really lose. I'm like, no, I'm the biggest Kong fan in the world, and he lost. Like plain and simple. But yeah, like they made him come back looking strong, and like that's all you could really hope for in a movie like this. Like whether your favorite monster is Godzilla or Kong, there are enough moments in this movie to make you be like, yeah, that's why I like that guy so much.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So this is just, I feel like they just accomplished what they needed to do and succeeded in accomplishing that. I just did a double positive there, but whatever.
I'm just curious to see now, like the technically, I guess, in the sequence of movies, round 3, because you got Kong taking it in 1962, you got Godzilla taking it in 2021, so we're going to have to wait another 60 years before we see, like, the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker. I'll be there in the theater, probably in my wheelchair.
So will I. So, again, Mechagodzilla, what all did you think about him, like, design-wise, and how they implemented him in the movie?
Design-wise, I wasn't sold on it at first, but seeing in the movie, I was like, it would make sense because it would be modeled after this universe's Godzilla. So he would be like kind of stockier and wider. It wouldn't be like as sleek as Mechagodzillas that we're used to. And having him have those Godzilla mannerisms with like I said, the finishing move that he tries to like do, and they actually like in universe, it made sense for kind of having him have like the giant like claw machine, longer arms, because I don't know, like in the Toho ones, it was always like, let's make it exactly like Godzilla. I'm like, if you're going to go that far, why would you not add obvious advantages to your machine? So they're like, no, we can't give him a clear advantage because we want it to look just like Godzilla. It's like, well, all right. Like, if that's what you want.
The only time they don't do anything with, or the only time they do things with the arms is with the 74 with the like finger missiles. Like that's the only time I could think that they've done any advantage with the arms.
Yeah, that's like their that's the evil space Mechagodzilla that's like disguised as Godzilla at first, which is always fun. I like, framing Godzilla for murdering Anguirus or whatever he did in the beginning of that movie. But yeah, I think he gets a drill hand in one of the 2000s movies, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, in Tokyo SOS. Yeah.
That's right, okay, because that's the figure I have, the Monster Arts with that drill attachment. I'm like, I don't remember this offhand, but then I went back and looked at it. I'm like, oh, that's right, okay, cool.
Lucky bastard, you got that figure.
That's it. It's the only Mechagodzilla I have up until this new one eventually comes out, which is on pre-order. But
absolutely.
Yeah, like I liked his design once I actually saw it in motion. He had enough like weaponry like to really sell him as like a huge threat to these monsters. I liked it.
And they made his beam like strong enough to compete with Godzilla's beam, which we've already seen can decapitate Mutos from the inside out, just completely slice through buildings. So Godzilla's breath in this universe, it's a pretty big deal. But then Mechagodzilla is just like, well, time to crank up the notch, and then just like murders Godzilla with the beam, and after they have a couple cinematic seconds of a beam battle.
they have their Dragon Ball beam clash, and yeah, Mechagodzilla overpowers them pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. It's some good stuff.
Yeah, overall on the spectrum of like MonsterVerse movies, I had probably the most fun with this one.
Mm-hmm.
Do I dare say it's my favorite of the MonsterVerse movies? I may dare.
Above Kong Skull Island?
Yeah, as much as I like Kong Skull Island, like this one I think just delivered a little more for me. Like Skull Island I'd have to go back and watch again, honestly, because I've only seen it in the theater once. So it'd be interesting to go back and revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed that one quite a lot when I saw it, so it's worth a revisit.
Yeah, I think this movie, for all intents and purposes, I think this movie succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you can pretty much get the opinions of your target audience that are all going to be favorable, and the opinions of people who, may or may not be into this stuff regularly, they still pretty much enjoy it too. Like, that's a win. I remember King of the Monsters was like getting not great reviews from like, I don't remember if it was like actual like news reviewers or like movie reviewers, but like then the fan response of people who actually want to see this movie in the first place, they thought it was great. So there was like that disconnect there for a while. But this one I don't think had much of that. I think pretty much everybody universally enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple reviews that just tore it to shreds.
I'm sure there are. Yeah, there's always.
And it's honestly really interesting. Obviously you and I are I don't want to say pre-programmed, but we were going in kind of expecting to like it, or at least in trying to engage with it, I should say.
Yeah, I think we're willing to like concede certain ideas and concepts in the movie just to like we know that they're going to do certain things, and we're just like okay with it. Yeah, definitely.
So and seeing it from there's a podcast I listen to called Sardonicast, which has a couple movie reviewers that run it, and when they talked about Godzilla vs. Kong, they all rated it like a 0.5 star or 1 star out of 5. So and listening to them, it's interesting coming from them, self-described and self-proclaimed non-kaiju fans, and it's just a good perspective to see.
Yeah, I'm interested. Like every time I hear something like negativity coming in for a movie like like this, or like any of the movies that are kind of a more niche audience that maybe wouldn't reach like a huge appeal to like I guess average moviegoers. Like when I hear these negative reviews of a movie like Godzilla versus Kong, I'm like, well, what were you looking for this movie to be? Because if you go and see a movie called Batman, you basically just expect Batman to be in it and doing Batman things. So Godzilla vs. Kong gives you these two characters fighting. Yeah, like that's what you get when you pay to see this movie. So like, I don't know. I guess it just depends on their fandom, and if they're seeing it expecting some kind of cinematic masterpiece on every level. I don't think they went in with the right expectations. Maybe.
Who knows? All opinions are perfectly fine, but it's just interesting seeing the contrast. I mean, even just mainstream critics like it for the most part, but just seeing the negative reviews too is always good.
Yeah, I mean, everything in balance,
as Thanos would say.
Yeah.
So what would you rate this movie if you had to out of 10? And where, I know you kind of mentioned you daring to put this at the top of the MonsterVerse, but how does it rank with the MonsterVerse?
Well, let's see. If I'm going out of 10, thinking back now, I'd probably give it let's say 8.5, 9 maybe, if I'm like really in the mood for it. I pretty much got everything I needed to out of it. Just the only thing kind of bringing it down, like I said, were like some of the human characters just did not interest me, and I couldn't really follow like the idea that the movie was trying to present me with. It was just a little bit outside the range of things that I was willing to just go with. But yeah, if I had to remember, I think King of the Monsters wouldn't be far behind this. So I'd say maybe like an 8. Probably the same for Kong Skull Island. And Godzilla 2014, it's been like I've only seen that once in 2014, so I'd have to go
Holy
back.
shit.
Yeah, I know. So I'd have to go back and watch it again. I think now I would have a better appreciation for it because like I just know what's happened to the MonsterVerse since then, and
The power of hindsight, yeah.
yeah, going back and seeing it, like I do remember somebody bringing up recently, like one of the things that 2014 did really well is show you some of the actual like devastation that happens, like where people are kind of huddled in the city, like in kind of like concentrated areas to kind of figure out, okay, who's looking for who. We got to try and like figure everything out here. Like you don't see much of that in Godzilla movies.
You could call it the aftermath of a
Yeah, I did my best not to say that. I was like, okay, well, here it comes. But yeah, like that kind of that idea of like we're actually seeing probably for the first time, like since 1954, like you're seeing the devastation caused by this attack and everything that kind of follows. So, I don't know. I don't know where I would put 2014. I'd have to watch it again to give it a real fair shake.
I definitely recommend it.
It's sitting out there on Blu-ray somewhere, so I have no excuse.
Well, get to it. I think the Millie Bobby Brown subplot brings it down. That's the biggest problem I have with the movie, and just minor like inconsistencies and continuity errors with what characters say, and bring it down a little bit more. I think I'd give it an 8. Now I might not go as far as a 9 or as high as a 9. I think just enjoyment it's a solid 8. And out of the MonsterVerse, it's my second favorite. Back, I think you commented on the video, but back in actually when the movie came out, I watched the entire MonsterVerse leading up to GVK, and I think I ranked it 2014, GVK, King of the Monsters, and then Skull Island. I think that'd be my ranking.
Nice. Can't argue with that. I mean, it's like no matter where you put these movies, they're all, if you're a fan of this kind of stuff as you and I are, like you're gonna get something out of any of them. So it's just kind of down to your preference.
Exactly. And not to say that Skull Island isn't a good movie. It's just out of the 4 that we have right now, it's the last one I'd put in.
That was the thing about like when Skull Island came out, like 2014 was still pretty fresh on everybody's mind, and that one, as we mentioned before, was like a lot more tonally like dark and bleak, and then Skull Island was a much brighter, much more joking and kind of you had John C. Reilly in there, so like certain parts you're just like laughing out loud at some of the stuff he's saying, and it's like, is this really in the same continuity? But they kind of found a balance for that, and I think it worked overall.
Absolutely. Well, our next movie is Mortal Kombat 2021. This movie just kind of got announced and then just dropped. I remember back in December, I think it was, or it might have been November, Warner Bros. Released a video saying we're releasing new Warner Bros. Movies onto HBO Max simultaneously with movie theater releases. And then they just showed the logo of Mortal Kombat. And when I saw that, I was like, wait, what? Mortal Kombat? when was that coming? It just sort of popped up out of nowhere.
See, I remember, I don't know if it was like officially announced or if it was just one of those things where people were trying to get it off the ground, but it seemed like for years they were trying to get this Mortal Kombat thing like greenlit and then casted and going. So I remember like there was the web series where like the initial thing that somebody put online was kind of like a pitch to like make their own kind of interpretation of Mortal Kombat, and that got some steam, but it never really went anywhere. And that was like 7 or 8 years ago, before this movie came out. So like it was a lot of like stop and start, it seemed like, with Mortal Kombat. So by the time they actually did get around to this movie, I almost didn't believe that it would happen, just because I've seen so much of that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they got this out. for for better or for worse, I think maybe is what people could agree on.
Yeah, for neutral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the first two Mortal Kombat movies from 95 and 97, I believe, are pretty good. Well, okay. Entertaining, let's just say.
Yeah. I will I'll go once again on record and say that 95 I still really enjoy, and I think they did as good a job as they could have done with the plot of the original game. There were some little details that they left out that probably just would have made the movie feel a little more convoluted if they included them, so I don't mind that they're not in there. And then, it came together nicely at the end. Every character got what you needed the characters to get. And then Annihilation happened, and it was a disaster, and it was a mess, and it's something that's so fun to just put on and laugh at, that I love Annihilation for the reason of it being just so terrible. And, again, that was 97, so... 20 some odd years later, they finally got around to another one.
Yeah, 97 was a bad year. It had Annihilation and then Batman and Robin. My goodness.
Actually, I'm curious to see what else came out around that time. It was were all movies just terrible in 1997? Do I remember correctly?
I don't know. I'd have to look back and see what came out. Actually, anybody interested? Cap and I, last time he was on, discussed Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So, if you want to, you can put that podcast on and listen to a year and a half younger version of Cap and myself talk about a couple movies. Yep,
I'll go into detail on that one about why I love Annihilation so much.
So, with this one, I think the main hook of it is that this is an R-rated Mortal Kombat movie, which makes sense because the games, they're a bit graphic and gory.
Yes. I think I would agree.
Literal X-rays of kunais stabbing people's brains and people cracking, or breaking, not cracking, breaking people's rib cages and sawing them in half with jet streams and all kinds of family-friendly stuff.
Yeah, when the rating came down, and I think it was the director said, oh yeah, there are going to be fatalities in this movie, and it's going to have all that kind of stuff. It set, not a standard, but it set a precedent that I think people were expecting from this movie. And certain elements of that did make it in, and some of it was pretty well done, I think. As far as the violence and the fatalities and stuff that we did get, I think some of them worked pretty well.
One, I talked about this with my friends when it came out. I was saying I was surprised at how few fatalities there were. Just because, the modern day stuff is this 13-step operation to get the fatality. You throw someone in the air, then Scorpion does the get over here spear, and then he throws his knife, and then a sword, and then another kunai, and then slams him into the ground, and then you see his neck break, and then he stomps his head in. There's this chemical process to get to the fatality in these new games, but I guess I was so focused on that multi-step fatality. I was like, oh yeah, in the original game, Kano's fatality is just ripping someone's heart out, or who else? Sonya Blade's fatality is the rings. No, hers isn't the rings. That's her power move. Her special move. I forgot what Sonya's fatality.
Her fatality is blowing the kiss and
yeah, that's right.
Basically melting you. Yeah, that's the thing. When they finally got around to putting the classic fatalities in the movies, we've seen those kind of become just not quaint moves by comparison, but yeah, a lot of the times in the newer games, they're just variations on normal moves that you can do, and if you do it right, it does the fatality version. But that's not the standards of fatalities have increased so much to just be so over the top that seeing the original ones is oh yeah, it's just a guy getting his head cut off. It's just no big deal in Mortal Kombat. That happens it's all the time.
Who would ever think that? Oh yeah, it's just a guy getting his head torn off.
Yep.
Would be weird. a phrase that you would say.
Yeah, well, we've had all these years of Mortal Kombat media and all this stuff. So, like, I mean, when they did the classic fatalities, they did a good job with them. So, like, the Scorpion, skull burning and the Kano heart rip and Shang Tsung stealing the soul and everything. Like, it looked good for the most part, I think, on the screen. And it was unmistakably Mortal Kombat stuff happening in a Mortal Kombat movie. So I was like, all right, not bad. But then there was, in my opinion, there was a lot of non-Mortal Kombat stuff happening too, where it kind of not took me out, but it made me just wonder why it was there in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Namely, Cole Young's family. That like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, I'm like, they're really just in here because they're going to end up getting in trouble and somebody's going to have to save them or something, right? Like, that's like the thing you see coming from the beginning of the movie. And that's, surprise. That turns out to be exactly what happens. And then I think a lot of people's issue with this movie were like, it's about Mortal Kombat, but the Mortal Kombat tournament doesn't actually take place in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which
it's the lead up to Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, which didn't bother me, but it does open up a lot of like technicalities in this movie where I had actually talked about this with Ian of 616 Entertainment as well, and he was, I think I liked it a little more than he did, but we did kind of agree on a lot of the certain things that happened where, by the end of the movie, they hadn't even started the tournament yet, but I was, in my brain, I was like, well, technically that means Shang any rules because he's not allowed to be doing all this stuff when the tournament is going on. But if he's just like killing everybody without the tournament, yeah, he probably broke the law, but it's nothing in the Mortal Kombat rules that say you can't do this before the tournament starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, the internal logic of why Shang Tsung can't do all this stuff, like, it's like, no, he's allowed to do all of it. Like, there's no stakes for any of it.
Yeah.
And then,
Yo, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
It's just, like you said, there's a couple internal logical inconsistencies. Even with what the characters do, Raiden brings all the fighters into the training area, and then he brings them to the void where it's like, Shang Tsung cannot fight us here. It's like, well, why didn't you just bring everybody to that void instead of to that like sand castle that everyone was training in?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this one had far more consistency issues than Godzilla vs. Kong, despite kind of being on the same level of I don't want to say same level of filmmaking, but just on the same caliber of reasonable suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, where Godzilla vs. Kong wasn't afraid to like give people exactly that Godzilla and Kong fighting. Like Mortal Kombat seemed like it almost wanted to like hold back on doing some of the Mortal Kombat things. So like when Raiden took them to that void, one of the things that that I had discussed with Ian some time ago was like, why wasn't that a Mortal Kombat stage or a level or something? Like, why didn't he take them to like somewhere where we, the audience, would recognize it if we've seen Mortal Kombat for all these years? Like, we would be like, oh, wow, that's, this stage. Mm-hmm. And so many of those areas that would have been much cooler to see in the movie, like, just didn't appear. Like, Outworld looked like just kind of a wasteland. It wasn't the Outworld that we would have recognized from playing the games all these years. Mm-hmm. Same comes with, like, some of the fight. Like, there was the fight with Cole Young and Goro, which, like,
just took place in like a trailer park or something.
Yeah, it's like somebody's backyard they're fighting. And I'm like, that's not where it's not where I want to see Goro. Like,
I think the only level that they pull from the game is the guy that Jax fights, because I think they're on a bridge. It's like that moon bridge.
Oh, it's like the pit. Yeah, like and that was another thing too. Like they got Jax and I think that was Reiko, whoever it was, fighting on the pit, but then they don't use the pit move. Like Jax does his like hand clap on his head fatality, I think.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, if you have the pit, you have to throw somebody in the pit. It's like, I don't know. It seems like one of those rules that they should know. If you're going to put this on the screen, people are going to want to see it get used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
They
it's interesting. I know they took a lot of creative liberties with the mechanics itself of Mortal Kombat, because they're like, if you have this birthmark, then you're like destined to be fighting in this great tournament called Mortal Kombat. It's like, well, that's not exactly how the game works, and and the Arcana, that's not exactly how that works either. You know, maybe it's like the animalities from Annihilation, where they could just turn into like CGI monstrosities.
Sweet looking dragon Hydra things. That was the first thing I thought of, though, when they were talking about like, if you have this marking, you'll fight in Mortal Kombat, and if you kill somebody with it, it goes to you. I'm like, oh, that's that stupid dragon tattoo that flies off of everybody in Annihilation, and like, oh man. But yeah, like certain characters were well done, and then others just were not. So it was like, I don't know. Like, it was very much like if they had put more thought and a little more effort into bringing more Mortal Kombat stuff into it, I think a lot of people would have been much happier. So it's like we were talking about with Godzilla versus Kong, where like the fans of Godzilla or Godzilla and Kong, they got what they wanted out of this movie. Like Mortal Kombat fans, I don't think got what they wanted from the Mortal Kombat movie because the movie was too afraid to be Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the violence and stuff was about the only recognizable thing, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that, and people saying like fatality or flawless victory. You know, that bit cheesy, but that's not out of the realm of possibility with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, they put like a few Easter eggs in there for people to like spot, but it just made you like, I don't know, for me watching it, I'm like, okay, they show, you know, a statue of Shao Kahn, or they show like a picture of freaking like Motaro or something on the wall.
Johnny Cage,
I'm like,
a poster of Johnny Cage's movie, yeah.
I'm like, see, that's all cool, but like, why?
Put it in
like,
this.
Just put more stuff in this. Don't, you know, Easter eggs are great when done right, but don't put Easter eggs in where it's going to make people think I'd rather be watching that stuff than this.
Exactly. One thing I'm really concerned about, though, like characters like Goro and Kano and Kung Lao, you know, they're all spoilers. They're all killed in this movie. It's like, well, are they going to show up in a potential sequel? Because, you know, Kung Lao shows up. Actually, I think all these characters show up in the next movies, or in the next in following games. But it's like Sub-Zero makes sense to be killed in this movie because it's Bi-Han, so then they can get Kuai Liang Sub-Zero, the good Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
And Bi-Han can become Noob Saibot. But it's like, Goro, is Kentaro gonna take over, or is Goro gonna come back? And Kano, like, he's probably one of the best characters in the movie just because of the performance. It's like he just gets killed by getting stabbed in the eye with a garden gnome. And
I forgot about that. Oh,
so it leaves a lot of questions in my head of how they're going to pull off a sequel when they've killed 3 of these major characters in the first movie that hasn't even touched the tournament itself.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know it's always explained in Mortal Kombat that there's like soul magic and you can bring people back and do all this other stuff, and like they could do that, but with the tone that this movie set, I don't know that they would, because like I said, it seems like they're almost hesitant to do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, at least what we do know about Mortal Kombat is there are plenty of characters to pick from and put in. So,
absolutely.
You know, like you said, you know, Johnny Cage not even in this movie. He's been in every game since the first one, you know, more or less. He missed a couple, but like he's one of the first characters you think of. So the fact that they left out certain main characters means that they could bring them in for potential sequels, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think they've backed themselves into a corner. Goro is the big baddie of the first game.
Mm-hmm.
At least, yeah, I think he is. Yeah, he is.
He's the last guy you fight before Shang Tsung, but like all in the arcade like attract thing when nobody's playing, and it just puts the text on the screen and tells you the story. Like it's hyping Goro up. He's the guy. You're going to be afraid of Goro when you get to him, and good luck fighting him because he's big and strong and 4 arms and everything. So like, yeah, it's, as far as the first game is concerned, like you're going to be lucky if you beat him.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested and also hesitant to see how they proceed should they make a sequel to this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch it mostly now out of curiosity for like, what are they going to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it going to be a tournament? I wonder. That'd be interesting.
Exactly. So I think we should go through a couple of the main characters because there are a couple. Some are good, some are bad. I think we should start off though with like the main face of Mortal Kombat, which is Scorpion. He's the marketable character. He's on every game cover for the last like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Scorpion in this movie and Hiroyuki Sanada's portrayal of him?
I thought it was fine. Like, I didn't have anything bad to say about him. I don't know that I really saw enough of him to give you like much about his character. Like, you see his origin right at the beginning of the movie,
which is a great setup. It's a great it's a great 10 minutes of the movie. It's amazing.
It's probably the best thing in this movie is like that first few minutes of Scorpion's origin, and it was really well done, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then but yeah, like by the time you actually see Scorpion like in his full like revenant, demonic form, it's like it's cool. He shows up and he fights and he does the Scorpion stuff that you want to see Scorpion do, but like nobody's really learned much about him. Like he does a little bit of exposition at Cole at the end, which at that point it's like, fine. Cole's just your descendant somehow because they forgot to check under in the floorboards for the baby when they came to your house that one time. But yeah, I mean, Scorpion to me was fine. He wasn't particularly interesting compared to other versions of Scorpion, but it was well enough done where like if they focus on him a little more in an upcoming movie, I could see that being interesting.
Yeah, I think Hiroyuki Sanada, he's an actor I really like. His most notable role, at least to a Western audience, would be it's just a cameo, but in Avengers Endgame, he's the Yakuza mob boss that Hawkeye kills in Tokyo or in Japan.
Which I didn't even remember until I watched Endgame again. I'm like, oh, that's just Scorpion. Hawkeye.
But I also know him from Speed Racer, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He plays like a shady businessman for one of the racers in the movie. So I have prior knowledge of Hiroyuki Sanada and what he's done. But I think they definitely did a good job casting him, and he, for being 60 years old, I think he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize he was that old, so that's news to me. I would have never guessed.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure they had some stunt doubles, especially with the sword fight at the end with Sub-Zero, because it's easy to do that with the mask and the hood. But I think for the most part, Scorpion is Scorpion, undeniably. But like you said, there's a lot of room that could have been. There's a lot of stuff that could have been explored more.
Yeah, I mean, with him, you pretty much get his story, and Scorpion, like, beyond his origin, he doesn't get a chance to be interesting in this movie. Like, throughout the games, he's he becomes like a more conflicted character, and he gets kind of used as a pawn by certain characters, and he goes out for revenge against them. So like that is when he gets more interesting. But for what you're given in this movie, it's basically just like a revenge subplot, which yeah, it's fine, but I just wish there were a little more to it.
Yeah, I think I haven't thought about the points that you brought up, but yeah, there's definitely more that could have been done with him. But with Sub-Zero, I think it's kind of a bit of the opposite. I think they definitely utilized him really well, especially since this is Bi-Han.
Yeah, like Bi-Han has no reason to be this interesting. Like he's basically the original Bi-Han. Like in the first game, all you get is like, yeah, he's an assassin sent to kill Shang Tsung, and you know,
Lin Kuei, and
yeah, like you don't get any context on him, and then he dies, and again later on, Noob Saibot becomes a thing, and you figure out much later on that that's Bi-Han again. So, like again, they're playing with the continuity here. But what I didn't really follow was like, right, so Scorpion's family was like killed in like hundreds of years ago, and Sub-Zero is just still alive. Like maybe Shang Tsung's like giving him the magic to stay alive or whatever the case. But like, I don't know. It struck me as a little unusual. But besides that, like Bi-Han, like he had a presence to him in this movie that I don't think anybody else really matched, and he in his fight scenes, like he was definitely like a threat. Like he was doing Sub-Zero stuff that was instantly recognizable, like creating the ice weapons and stabbing you with them, and then like using your blood to freeze it and stabbing you with that again too. It's like some of the scenes where he's like walking up the street and just like raining icicles down. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, that's cool.
Freezing Jax's gun, and you see the bullets like slowly move closer and closer to him.
Yeah, that was really
shot.
cool. That was definitely, yeah, I forgot about that, but that was really good. That was kind of my thinking while watching that scene. I'm like, why would you go in after him, Jax? Like, you can run away too. Like, you'll be fine if you do that. But yeah, Sub-Zero was cool.
Absolutely. I think what's cool is that the actor can speak Japanese and English, and Chinese, which they utilized pretty well. But this like Sub-Zero in this, like you said, he's. I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. So, you know, I've played one of the games before, but I'm with Mortal Kombat. You know, watching 616 and his Mortal Kombat Mondays, and watching your stuff as well. You know, I've definitely gained this massive array of knowledge just by watching and other people either play or explain. So, you know, it's really being able to interact with the movie much more informed is really cool. And being like me knowing that this is Bi-Han as opposed to Kuai Liang, and knowing who the fuck they are. So it's all really, from my outsider peripheral knowledge, I think Sub-Zero is extremely well done in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, he was one of the stronger characters in this for me. I think a lot of people can agree to Kano as well, just as far as being entertaining as a movie character. Like, plus he delivers enough of the Kano stuff that we've come to expect. Because Kano was an interesting one, because in the original games he didn't really have much like that made him stand out. But then when that 95 movie came out, that almost became what future versions of Kano would be. Like he would have the accent and have that kind of sense of humor and just
the
be that
exposed metal eye.
Yeah, he just have that kind of like dirtbag like attitude to him, where like that just became kind of how Kano was portrayed from that point on. So it was like interesting to see that was basically done again this time around, where Kano was that same character. And it still worked. Kind of hand it to him.
Well, if we want to, we can talk about Kano right now.
Yes, sure.
He's definitely the most entertaining character, namely just down to the performance and just how unhinged his vocabulary is.
Yeah. Yep. He like as bland as some of the other characters may seem, Kano like more than makes up for it. He's just chewing up the scenery and like dropping jokes in the background that like if you're not listening for it, you might miss it. But then if you catch it, you're just laughing at him in the background instead of paying attention to like the main conversation going on in the scene. But
yeah, he's definitely a show and a scene stealer. You know, the first time we meet Liu Kang, he shoots some fire at Kano, and Kano's like, "What the hell? Can you teach me how to shoot that fire?" And he's just nagging on Liu Kang the entire time they're walking through the desert, like, "Hey, teach me how to do that."
When he does finally get his eye laser, he's just like, "Yeah, it's better than a fireball." Like whatever he says to Liu Kang. Like,
yeah, I like how he was the first one to get the Arcana, because that gave him the power to do the heel turn later on in the movie. Which, you know, if you know anything about Mortal Kombat, you know that he's generally a bad guy. So the inevitable heel turn was very predictable. He's the only one out of the three new fighters that has the Arcana, namely because Jax doesn't have any arms. What's his name? Cole Young is having like confidence issues, and Sonya doesn't even have an Arcana. So
yeah.
I like how maybe I'm delving too deep into this, being, you know, like a film student and trying to find meaning where meaning isn't meant to be found. But I liked how he had the power with his beam, his eye beam, and it kind of corrupted him almost.
Yeah, or at least at the very least gave him the excuse to be like, all right, well now I can finally just do what I was planning on doing all the time. Yeah, because like when you first see Kano, he's already like held captive by Sonya, who's like, yeah, I know this guy. He's danger, and he's going to, you know, he's gonna kill us if we let him. So we got to keep an eye on him. We got to keep him tied to a chair and do all this stuff. Like, so like they know, and anybody that knows Kano's personality from the games and everything else, we also know as the audience too. So it was well done.
One thing about Kano though, and I mentioned this earlier with the fatalities, I'm not too big a fan of the way he died. The fight scene between Kano and Sonya was great, and inside the camper, and how claustrophobic it was, and it showed Sonya's like environmental utilization capabilities. And the same way that like the games do, at least the modern day games, where you can like use the environment, pick up a stick and smash somebody's head in with it. But I don't like how he was just stabbed in the eye with some like garden decoration, and then he's just like, okay, yeah, I'm dead, and then just falls down to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, they did their callback because he did say earlier that he hates gnomes or whatever, but then like, I don't know, to me that didn't need to be in there. Like, again, that's a thing that they could have replaced with a Mortal Kombat thing, but like garden gnomes are not a Mortal Kombat thing, so like why did they make the effort to bring that up and then deliver the payoff with the callback? I don't know.
If anything, that'd be a friendship. Just be like, garden gnome.
Yeah.
So
that's true. Yeah, they should have done that. It'd be a little bit better.
So Kano just overall is just entertaining to watch. He's kind of like the joke of, the actor that played Kano was hospitalized the other week because he broke his back carrying Mortal Kombat, or you know, those kinds of jokes.
Yep.
So you know, he definitely is one of the bright spots alongside Sub-Zero.
Yeah, definitely. I think those two characters, I think, were probably my favorites in the movie. And then like when I was trying to think of like, oh well, who would it be after that? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It pretty much goes downhill from here, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's namely because a lot of the characters just don't have anything to do. Jax is out of the picture for like a quarter of it because he has no arms and he can't do anything. Sonya doesn't have the dragon marking, so she can't even train. Eventually, she gets it when she kills Kano. And then Liu Kang and Kung Lao are just kind of already there. They've already mastered their power. Kung Lao is great with his frisbee hat. And then I keep forgetting his name. I keep thinking Luke Cage. Oh, it is Luke Cage. No, god damn it, what's his name? Luke Cage is from Marvel.
Yeah.
God damn it. Cole Young. That's his name.
There you go. Okay. I was like, which one is Luke Cage? I'm trying to think of like who could you be talking about?
Well, Luke Cage is the guy who can't like get cut or something from Marvel.
Yeah, indestructible skin.
Yeah, so I don't know why I said Luke Cage.
Well, it effectively ends up being this guy's power. Like he can just have like metal armor on his skin.
And apparently, he gets his Arcana after getting his ass beat by Goro, but then he basically goes Super Saiyan when Goro tries to kill his family, and then apparently his armor is spawned from the bracelet that his daughter gave him. That might be true. One of the behind the scenes clip has the actor being like, "Yeah, and this is my armor, and it comes out of the bracelet that my daughter gave me earlier in the movie." It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, basically. I'm like, so that's your plot armor. Got it.
Literally.
You're gonna beat Goro because this movie doesn't know how to write for Goro, who's supposed to be the Mortal Kombat champion for like 10 generations or whatever it is, and then he's gonna lose a fight in some guy's backyard to this guy with his armor.
Yeah. So Cole Young is definitely the weakest link of the movie. I think that's one of the like consensus pieces about the whole movie. It's like, yeah, Cole Young wasn't all that great.
Yeah, sadly, like they could have replaced him again with a Mortal Kombat character that would have served the same purpose of just like kind of taking the audience through the movie as like the outsider looking in and figuring it out as the audience figures it out. Like there are enough Mortal Kombat characters that could have fit that role, and they just didn't. They went with a totally new guy that the audience doesn't know anything about and therefore probably doesn't care about.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. We just don't care about him. And he's just like the copy and paste, like die-hard hero out of his element, and trying to figure out how to stop a four-armed dragon dude.
Yep. Doesn't take him long. He's like, I got it. Okay, we're good.
And I think the Super Saiyan comparison is pretty apt because it's pretty much just what happens. It's his family's in trouble and comparable to Krillin getting blown up by Frieza. And then he just like BTFOs Goro the same way Goku does Frieza. It's like, oh, well. Oh, there goes that memorable character.
It's like some trauma just sets in right away, and now he's like super powerful and ready to just do battle. And I'm like, oh, it's not what you do to Goro though. Like, come on, that should have been like Reptile or somebody, like, or Baraka, like somebody that's like known for somebody that's well known for being just like a fall guy in Mortal Kombat. Get Baraka in there, and nobody would have blinked an eye at it. But yeah,
the main champion of Outworld. Just losing to some out of his prime UFC fighter. Yeah,
whose like entire character arc was like, oh yeah, you used to be real good, and then now you're just not.
So, I mean, we kind of blew through a couple of the characters like Jax and Sonya, but they're not extremely memorable. Like that's the problem. They're just given nothing to do in the movie.
Yeah, even like. I think Shang Tsung is probably the greatest offender of that because, like, in the 95 movie, he was, like, for me personally, he was the best character because he was so interesting and his personality was just so captivating that anytime he was on the screen, I was like, I love this guy. He's such a good bad guy. And then fast forward to this movie, I'm like, this guy doesn't really do anything except sit in a chair, say, okay, we're going to send the next bad guy to go kill Cole Young or whatever. And then the next bad guy goes and does it and loses. And it's like Shang Tsung once again, just like, oh, well, guess we'll send a different bad guy. And I was like, you're not doing anything in this movie. Yeah. Like, yeah, you stole Kung Lao's soul, which...
That's Shang Tsung-y.
At least they're showing him, that like why people should be afraid of him. But I don't know. He just didn't have the same charisma that the 95 movie had.
Well, the actor for the 95 movie, I can never remember his name, but
That's Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa.
That's right. He like did such a great job. He just ate up the screen. He was such a presence in that first movie. I mean, his face too, like he would scrunch his face up and, admittedly overact a little bit, but it was all for the betterment of the film.
Yeah, and it didn't probably help their case that they got him back to do Mortal Kombat 11, the DLC.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they got his likeness and had him do the voice and everything, and so it's the Shang Tsung that you love. Again, he's back now, and then with that so fresh on your mind, you go in and you just see some guy that's not the Shang Tsung and he doesn't really bring anything new to the table that's really all that entertaining. So it's like, I don't know. It wasn't for me.
Yeah, it was... Shang Tsung is one of those characters in this movie that, like you said, is he's just given nothing to do. Yeah,
like he's just plotting the whole movie, but then his plot never pays off because we don't get a tournament. So like all the guys that he was supposed to have killed and just basically be like, well, they can't compete if they're dead. Like that kind of mentality, like it never really delivered because the ending fight ended up being Cole Young against Sub-Zero and, Scorpion eventually versus Sub-Zero. But like, yeah, so your main character is not even really a part of the fight that everybody wants to see by the end of the movie. Like, everybody just wants to see Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
And then when Shang Tsung and Raiden meet, Raiden just zaps him into another dimension. It's like, yeah, bye.
Yeah, you're not doing him any favors by having him go up against Raiden, who can just teleport people anywhere he wants, I guess.
Exactly, and then just having him just without any effort just be like, yeah, we're not going to mess with you anymore.
That's the one thing, yeah, like with Shang Tsung, he's basically, like I said before, like he's not following any rules of the tournament because the tournament's not happening yet. But I guess the same can go for Raiden, where he could just be like, all right, I'm going to just put you somewhere else because I don't have to deal with your nonsense right now because the tournament's not in session. So, like, just teleport you somewhere else.
So, compared to Godzilla vs. Kong, this, for me, Mortal Kombat wasn't nearly as entertaining, but I still found plenty of enjoyment in the movie, or to be found in the movie. Would you say the same thing for you?
I think so. I mean, I basically sat here and buried it the whole time, but I did enjoy watching it. I don't know that it's a movie I'll ever like put back on. It's not like 95 I could put back on and have a good time with it. Annihilation, I do regularly put it on and have fun with it. Yeah, like every day. But this one, I don't know. Like, I have a hard time thinking of a time when I'm ever going to be that bored that I put this movie back on.
Oof, that's... ouch.
But, if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, it's worth watching at least once. You'll probably enjoy certain things about it. And, that's the best I can really say about it, unfortunately. Just there were a few things that should have been put in place of the things that they did. And I think it would have been a better rounded movie, but that's not what we got.
Fair enough. How would you rate this out of 10?
Oh, God.
Because I'd probably put it at around a 5.5 to a 6.
I was thinking maybe 6, and that's being kind of just generous because I like Mortal Kombat. If it was just one of those things where I didn't care about Mortal Kombat at all, I'd be like maybe a little slightly different one way or the other. I have this thing where like the less I know about a franchise, the more I tend to enjoy the movie. So like I'm not looking for things to be accurate or right or wrong. I'm just going in and just being like, well, let's see what it is. And if I like it, great, because I'm not looking for it to be authentic or accurate. I just want it to be fun.
Yeah, so entertaining is the best way to put it. Great, no. Good, yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, on to Godzilla Singular Point. This show kind of just came out of nowhere. At least the trailers did, and then the show kind of came and went. And I follow a lot of different like kaiju based channels, and not a lot of them really ever talked about Singular Point. Only one of them I know really discusses Singular Point at length. So I'm curious to see what you think about the movie. The show.
So I know it was pretty much happening like once a week for a while, I think. And then by the time they aired the final episode, it all ended up on Netflix. So I just waited for that, and I watched it over the course of a couple of days. I just watched like a few episodes here and there. I enjoyed it for the most part. Like, it was one of those things where it's hard to just it was hard to follow at points, I think, down to the fact that they tried to explain their in-universe science so much that me not being a guy who's like necessarily scientific minded, it started to lose me when they started getting into the specifics of certain things. And like when they were talking about like all their kind of like theoretical concepts and stuff, I'm like, all right, that's all I need to be along for the ride. But then they started trying to like detail it almost too much, where I don't know, in my brain I was like, if I could make sense of this, it almost seems like I'd start thinking like, well, wait a minute, you're ruining your own logic by trying to add more detail to it. But luckily I don't understand any of it, so I'm just going to go with it. But the monster scenes were fun. They were really well done. I liked the liberties they took with certain monsters. I think worked in this universe. Like, I liked Anguirus. I liked how Rodan was like an entire species of like pterodactyls. I think that was cool. Jet Jaguar being this, like, I wasn't sure what I was going to think of this version of Jet Jaguar, but I really ended up liking it. Godzilla himself, of course, like, I say borrowed, but this seemed like very derivative of Shin Godzilla with all the evolutions and all the science and all the different things kind of structurally about this show. Mm-hmm. And compared to that movie, like, there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Much like Shin Godzilla, I appreciated it and I liked it, and I was happy that it was just kind of a different take. And I mean, I liked all the designs of the monsters, all the fights. I thought overall I enjoyed it. I think you probably could have slimmed down on some of the science jargon, but probably people would disagree on that if they're like into that kind of thing. So I don't know. Yeah, like I think I said before, like, I'm not fully 100% sure my overall opinion of this series yet.
I think you and I are pretty much on the same page. Like, monster stuff, all in all, is pretty well done. There are a couple creative liberties they took, obviously, not only with designs, but with origins and just how they interact with the environment around it. But the science jargon, like you said, there's just so much you have to keep track of. Like, I think for 3 or 4 episodes they're explaining what the singular point is, but I don't get what it is. And then there's like this gun, or I think it's a gun, and then they show the oxygen destroyer, and then it like makes red spikes that do things, and then
yeah,
there's a lot of things that I'm sure if I like paused at every new line of dialogue and considered it, I'd probably understand it. But it's very heavy on its own pseudoscience,
mm-hmm.
almost to its detriment.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my favorite character was that old man that was like driving Jet Jaguar around on the back of his truck.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guy who piloted Jet Jaguar, I think at one point, like that guy, I could watch a series about him and be perfectly content.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
it's so concerned with making sure that everyone is like, yes, this is this bit of science with this bit of science, and then this science from episode 2 is what caused this science. You know, there's just too much of it almost.
yeah, I think so. I mean, how many was that? Like 13 episodes,
I think so.
give or take. Okay, yeah. Like I think they could have done this in 8, and then I probably would have had a more concrete opinion of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like in Shin Godzilla, there was a lot of the science and stuff too. But you're limited to about a 2-hour movie, give or take. So it's not going to be enough to make an audience member be like, right, I'm totally lost, because in every science scene they're going to switch back to like the political offices and what's going on with Godzilla. If they try and go near him when he's frozen in the middle of the city, he'll like his defense is going to shoot down their drone thing, and like they do enough aside from the science to keep you kind of going with the movie, whereas this is all just it's science after science.
Yeah, and a lot of the science too, comes from like the two main characters texting each other with their AI, and it's just going across the screen rapid fire, and there's just so much information that just gets dumped on you in like a 1 to 2 minute segment of people just sending text back and forth to each other about what's happening in the science within the universe, and it's just really disengaging for massive parts of an episode.
Yeah, those long kind of back and forth communications where they're like, oh, that's what this is, that's why this is the way it is, this is why this, oh, so you mean that? And it's like, I don't need all this. I just need like a summary maybe at the end would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like, when I say you could have done this in less episodes, I think some of that is kind of the stuff that I'm thinking of that you could probably do without.
Yeah, absolutely. If we want to, we can move on to the monsters, because that's the characters that they just kind of meld together, at least for me, into like the science people, the mechanic people, and then the politicians. So I have a hard time distinguishing characters from each other, at least just
Yeah.
for me. But
Yeah,
the monsters,
I'm there with you.
yeah, there's just a lot. But the monsters, I think they did a really good job. You already mentioned Anguirus, the swarms of Rodan, Godzilla and his evolution, and Jet Jaguar too, who I was not expecting to like at all. At least the design they showed in the first trailer. But
Yeah,
his evolution of his design, I started to really like his design.
yeah, I like that he took on some different forms too. So like the first version of Jet Jaguar you see changes into like a little more kind of familiar Jet Jaguar that like you would recognize a little bit more from the movies. And then I liked that he was like a creation of these guys, because that's where I think they probably did it right, was the characters that you're going to spend the most time with Jet Jaguar are also the most interesting characters in the whole series to me. So like I didn't mind those guys with Jet Jaguar, having to get them from place to place, and you do see like in certain scenes like they kept some of Jet Jaguar intact from like what we knew about the original, from the actual Toho movie, where I think there's a scene where he's like on the back of a truck and he like shows an interest in like little kids that are looking at him, because that's the original Jet Jaguar was like built to be this little kid's friend, so he would naturally be like kind of friendlier towards children. I'm like, oh, that's cool, I like that.
I also like the AI implementation with Jet Jaguar. They made him an actual character, as opposed to just like a blank slate of a character.
Yeah, he was allowed to have like some personality.
Exactly. But Jet Jaguar, I was not expecting to like all that much. But throughout the course of the series, I definitely gained a lot more appreciation for him.
Yeah. And then, like, when his story kind of wraps up at the end, I was like, ah, man, kind of sorry to see him go. But I understand the movie or the show needed it to work out this way so that there was the, the red spikes you said before.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Rodan, if we want to move on to him. Rodan,
Yeah.
I was really, I thought from the initial trailer, I thought he looked like a walking steak. But I was really, really interested to see how they would pull Rodan off. Basically, what they do in this movie is, or movie, I keep saying movie, in this show, they have like swarms and flocks of Rodan that are just terrorizing Japan, and different types of Rodan. There are smaller ones that are more aggressive. There are larger ones that are more docile or something like that. But they basically do what the '90s Gamera trilogy did. I'm not sure if you've seen those movies, Cap.
No, I haven't. I've heard good things, though.
Oh, you definitely need to watch them. But in those movies, they have swarms of similar characters to Rodan called Gauss, and this show definitely, either intentionally or not, definitely has many similarities to that, and that's a good thing because that's a great part of the Gamera trilogy.
Nice.
So this is a really good deviation from the Rodan that we kind of know from previous movies where he's just kind of, dicking around doing his own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciated this version of Rodan. Like, basically swarms and swarms of, like, wild pterodactyl animals. Like, there was the fight scene with the larger Rodan and Jet Jaguar, which I thought was cool. It wasn't like a large scale kaiju fight scene. It was more like street level, but it was entertaining. It was good. It had like it basically like established what Jet Jaguar was going to be in this like human controlled, like piloted, almost like a mech style. So I was like, interesting. I like that more than I expected to, and they did a good job with the fight, I thought.
Yeah, and the presentation of it and the animation, which we can talk about later, definitely helps with all the fights and stuff. It's really good. It's really well done.
Yeah, definitely.
Couple other Anguirus. This is probably my favorite design for Anguirus. I don't know why I love it so much. Just how jagged he is and how just kind of awesome he looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, even with the liberties they took, it's still recognizable as Anguirus, which I like when that happens. Like the scene where he's like in the forest when you first kind of like encounter him properly. He's like fighting off like military and everything. Like that's cool. I like that. And to your point, yeah, the design definitely really cool.
And they don't. I'm kind of upset at how they treated him in the show because he's, Anguirus is my boy, but they just like kill him and just, oh man, I don't like how he was handled. I like what they did with him, but he was just more of a conduit to the science mumbo jumbo as opposed to an actual potential threat. Because one of the military men shoots at Anguirus, but then the main character is like, wait a minute, he's wiggling his dorsal plates or his back plates, and then you see like this little like warbling effect on his back, and then it's like, oh, Anguirus can predict time and or go through time and shield himself for things. And it's like Anguirus is a vessel for more science jargon that is largely uninteresting.
You're taking one of the most interesting things to happen up till that point in the show, and you're making it actually like an excuse to get back to like the least interesting part. Like, no, don't do that. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anguirus design is great, but the execution, at least for me, was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, when he got his chance to be on the screen and like doing kaiju stuff, I enjoyed it. But yeah, I had actually forgotten that they basically relegated him to a science project, and I was like, oh, that's no good. He's getting treated about as well in this as he gets treated by SH Monster Art.
Yeah. Well, at least they put him in this show.
Yeah, I mean, I can't complain.
So, I think the next big one is Godzilla. Yeah, there was Manda, but he just swims around doing stuff. He's not very important. There are those like Megalon Kumonga hybrids that looked interesting. That like their blood turned into Hedra.
Yeah,
that was just kind of that monster was just kind of a way to show that Jet Jaguar can actually fight.
Yeah, Jet Jaguar was capable of taking on like the whole like group of them.
Yeah, so those were just setting up the fight with Godzilla in the last episode. But speaking of Godzilla, I think this is a great interpretation for Godzilla. Not only with the comparisons to Shin, like you mentioned, both visually and story-wise, but the way they presented him and his just presence, kind of similar to Ghidorah in King of the Monsters, where he travels in like a hurricane. Godzilla basically travels in this like mushroom cloud of red dust.
Yeah, there's some of the scenes in this basically look like they were just lifted from Shin Godzilla. Like Godzilla kind of like standing facing the camera with like the explosions and the flames and everything behind him. I'm like, that's straight out of that movie. Like they knew what they were doing. They took some of the stronger parts of Shin and kind of carried it forward for this. And overall I like what they did, especially when you got to the was it Ultima, the final Godzilla form. I was like, just going off the strength of the design alone, I'm like, yeah, I'm buying that monster art. That looks great. And like when they do actually show him, like, at the end getting into the fight with Jet Jaguar, it was short, unfortunately. I wish it were a little more, but I get why it was that way. But yeah, it was actually pretty engaging, which probably the most engaging part of this series, I think. Yeah, I mean, Godzilla was really well done, which I imagine probably had to be the case for his own series. But yeah, I liked it. All the stages that he went through, they looked very unique and very different, which I thought was cool too.
I also liked for me, the borrowing of designs from previous monsters. Like there's the Titanosaurus with the first one, and then Varan, and then I'm not sure what that green one is supposed to be. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be Gabara, even though that like monkey kaiju is kind of a Gabara.
Yeah, definitely the Titanosaurus one definitely stood out to me. I'm like, what are they doing with that? Like, it's cool. Like big fan tail thing. Like, sure.
Yeah, and this I like how they kind of obscure the transformations. Like it's not shown in Shin Godzilla. That's one of the things that kind of is iffy when you see that like little yellow lizard turn into the red one.
From
stage
the
2
early,
stage 3, I think it is.
Yeah, when he finally makes landfall and can like stand on his own 2 feet. Like that's not great.
Looked a bit rough. So it's I like how they obscured that, because it leaves it up to the imagination. He could have just changed color and grown a little bit, or he could have like reconfigured his entire anatomy in like a really gross, disgusting way. So I think it kind of leaves it up to the imagination of the person.
Yeah, you don't know what's going on in that red cloud.
So, but Godzilla Ultima is definitely one of those designs that is undeniably Godzilla, but also just unique from the animation and the tail and the way he's presented.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. Like, say, people can kind of say what they want about these anime interpretations of Godzilla, but like Godzilla's overall design in the in this and in the last Netflix trilogy. Like, I've liked pretty much universally. I've liked how they made Godzilla look in these things. So, I mean, at the very least, they're doing that right.
Yeah, absolutely. They, with the trilogy and this, they definitely get Godzilla right.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're about to hit the 2-hour mark in about 5 minutes, which is crazy because we just talked about 3 things. So I think it's time to move on to some action figures because, man, there's a lot to talk about. We might have to cut some things just for time. But I think we'll start off with something we both collect, SH Monster Arts. And going back to GVK, Cap, are you getting Mechagodzilla?
Yes, I think I probably dropped a little spoiler earlier, but yeah, I am getting Mechagodzilla's on pre-order. As far as SH Monster Arts go, I've got that pre-ordered, and I've got the Godzilla Ultima that we just talked about. And I believe that's it as far as I can remember. This over the course of the year, obviously, I got the Godzilla and the Kong from GVK, and I really like them. I had the kind of the advantage of not having any of the other previous Godzillas that this is basically just a repaint of. Mm-hmm. So I think I appreciated this figure a little more just because it wasn't something I already had, basically. And Kong, I really like. I mean, he's smaller than maybe I expected him to be, but the movement you can get out of him and the fun you can have posing him around with his axe and everything is he's a good figure. I like him.
Yeah, Kong is a really fun figure. My copy, his left arm pops off at the bicep extremely easily.
Okay.
To the point of annoyance, and the the thigh cover on both of his legs is really, really wobbly. So, I guess it's better than having a broken torso joint, which I've seen, and leg joint too. I've seen plenty of people complain about the fragility of their copy. So I'm just happy it's not broken.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the figures, imports especially, when they start tensing up on the ball joint with the socket, I'm like, that's gonna eventually be bad because it's gonna eventually kind of seal up and break off. So I have shock oil that I just drop a little in there and kind of work it around the joint, and usually that takes care of it. Mm-hmm. And with Kong, I did that on I think one of the legs, just because I noticed it was starting to get a little bit more stiff to move, and I was like, I don't want to break him, so let me just do this. And he's been fine ever since, thankfully. Yeah.
So the 2 offerings we had, the 2 title characters, I think for the most part, I think I explained in a behind the scenes video that I did, individually for me they're not very impressive, but together they're good. So I definitely think overall together they're a great pair to have on the shelf.
Yeah, I got them out there in the living room. They're actually fighting on this $20 aircraft carrier that I got. And it comes with its own little planes and stuff too, but I also have some of the aircrafts that came with the Jack Pacific Godzilla figures from King of the Monsters, mm-hmm. with the destructible buildings and everything. They all came with a couple little helicopters and stuff. So I was like, I can use all this stuff. And like you say, as a package deal, they look really cool together.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting for Mechagodzilla to get here in, I think, January or December or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm already kind of thinking, what am I going to do with that? Because I like where my Godzilla and Kong are. I like that setup. Mm-hmm. So I'm I'm not going to want to, move that. But is Mechagodzilla going to just be by himself? That's not going
to fly.
Yeah, I don't know. I do have, some of the other MonsterVerse guys set up on, a kind of a bigger display I have. But I'm well, I could stick him in there, but he would just be doing his own thing because Godzilla's fighting Ghidorah and... Mechagodzilla is going to just stand there and watch, maybe? That doesn't... Nah, he's got to be doing something better than that.
Exactly. It's the woes of a collector.
Yeah, I mean, I have from, 2014 and King of the Monsters, I have the NECA versions of Godzilla, too, so I'm maybe he can just fight one of those guys. That's fine. Do something.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to that coming out. Whenever it does come out, it looks really good. I'm a little bit concerned if you look at some of the pictures. The design has a bunch of pistons and hydraulics, so I'm not sure how that's all gonna work. And the die cast is it's gonna give this figure some heft. So if he falls off the shelf, I don't know how well he's gonna hold up.
Yeah, I will say, like we talked about a little before, like the heavy arms Mechagodzilla, like he's got the die cast like feet, and they do give the figure some weight, but they also make it so like because monster arts, they're pretty lightweight for the most part.
Yeah.
But with the feet being so heavy, you could actually like get him balanced in like some pretty crazy poses that you wouldn't be able to ordinarily because his feet are just so like stable that it just supports his weight really well. So I'm hoping that's the case with this one too.
Yeah, they lower the center of gravity, which makes him more stable to. It gives you peace of mind that he won't fall off.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of King of the Monsters, Ghidorah.
Yeah, mine's still holding up pretty good. He hasn't taken a shelf dive yet.
Yeah, mine, like, I mean, I wasn't chancing it. Like, I got him up on every stand he came with, and, like, I got Godzilla in front of him, so if he does tip over, there's at least something there to hold him up. Like, but, no, I shouldn't say, yeah, I've had no issues with mine.
Well, that's good, because that's not a cheap thing.
No, I did see that re-release coming out, and I was like, yeah, it looks better, but I'm not doing that. Like, it does look better. Fair point to him, but yeah, I got one already. I'm good.
Yeah, same here. But that Godzilla Ultima, going to that one, that tail, man, there's that long, like, profile where it's a landscape photo. You can just see the tail is like 3 or 4 times the figure's height.
Yeah.
So
I
don't know what I'm gonna do with that.
I mean, like with Shin Godzilla, like the tail was obviously very long, but it's meant to be kind of like posed upright in the air. And so it's like kind of thicker for that reason, like because it needs to support its own weight. So I'm wondering, like, with this one, is it like hopefully it's going to be able to lock in and hold the pose, because otherwise it's just going to be like on the ground behind him, and I'm like, that's not what I want. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see how they engineer it.
Yeah, that's if they can get that to keep a pose, I will be very surprised, and pleasantly surprised as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like how he comes with some scale size Jet Jaguar figures with him.
Yeah, that was cool to see that. They haven't really done much of that in the MonsterVerse line. The only one I can think of is that Godzilla from the Netflix trilogy, the Godzilla Earth, that comes with the smaller like Godzilla Filius thing. It's like I mean, apart from that, you get a few that come with like the Super X or something, like the little tanks that came with Destroya, stuff like that. But
yeah,
little scale stuff isn't something you really see a lot of. So it was cool.
And it kind of makes this Godzilla seem a bit small, though, because this Godzilla isn't like 3,000 feet tall or whatever. He's like Showa Millennium size, so like 50 meters or so. It's not like it's a big deal, and this figure is massive, just from how thick his proportions are. His legs are literally half of his body. And I know I'm same with the Mortal Kombat sequel. If that happens, I am optimistic, but cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's fair.
Let's see. They announced or teased a Jet Jaguar from Singular Point. They haven't shown any photos or even a prototype, so the jury is still out on that. I think I might just stick with Ultima.
I mean, yeah, like I like Jet Jaguar enough to like where if this happens, I'm definitely going to grab it just because I need some version of Jet Jaguar. I'd obviously rather have the classic, but this show made me appreciate this version of it. So I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's cool. I do end up liking this character. So, yeah, having the figure, I'd be totally cool with that. It also, again, depends on how much money it is and, if I think it's going to be worth it. But overall, I'll just wait until I see some pictures and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely, we'll have to see how it turns out. And then there's one that's announced that's coming out next month, I think. And then there's one that's teased, and that's the Final Wars Gigan and Final Wars Godzilla. I know you already have the original release of Gigan. So are you going to get this new improved Joker product of a of a cash grab?
No, I skipped it. I liked the way it looked, and I know there's a lot of people that missed the Gigan first time around, so like this is perfect for them.
Yeah, me included.
But like I'm already like I got my one, and I got it for a really good price when it was like kind of just people weren't interested in it. So I was like, yeah, sure, this is fine. I don't know that I would have necessarily paid the full price for that version of Gigan because it's just not what I see in my mind when I think of Gigan. Like I would rather have the classic. Mm-hmm. But, for the price I paid, I was happy with it, and I don't need like to do it again, basically.
Yeah, it's that like price of entry is just too high.
Mm-hmm. The accessories are nice, though. I'll give it that. The accessories this one comes with are really cool.
Yeah, the grappling hook and the, what do they call it, the cluster beam.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely looks really, really cool. And I hope it looks cooler next to that Final Wars Godzilla that got teased like back in May that we haven't seen anything about since.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a no-brainer because they've done basically every other version of the Millennium Godzilla at this point. So, like, Final Wars is, like, the only outstanding one. Like, they know it's a fan favorite. So, and I'm just hoping if it happens, they open the door up for, like, Final Wars Anguirus and finally get him in the line.
I just want a Final Wars line.
Yeah, just the whole series.
I don't think they'll do that because no one's going to buy an ever a figure or
I was just thinking, like, he's the one that I'd be like, all right, well, you're digging a little too deep already, I think.
So it's like I said, it's one that has to be fully revealed. I'm definitely going to get Godzilla and probably Gigan. So pray for my wallet in a couple weeks when Gigan charges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that feeling.
So, next up on the little list I have here, a little thing called the HasLab Sentinel. You recently became a father of twins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true. Takes a lot, but it's well worth it.
So, you recently, as of last week, I believe, received 2 of the pretty groundbreaking HasLab Marvel Legends Sentinel.
Yeah, that was quick. So I think it was like there was the Tuesday night, like the 7th, I want to say. I got an email at about 6:30 at night saying like, "Hey, your Sentinels shipped." 2 different emails, 2 different tracking numbers, and they were both here the following day. So like,
oh wow.
As it happens, yeah, like currently right now, there's a bunch of my friends who are still waiting on the shipping email and stuff, like because Hasbro has taken, I guess they're sending these out in waves. I don't know exactly, but it doesn't seem like there's any order to how this is happening. Mm-hmm. I just know I got my 2 quick, so I'm assuming that when you get this email, if you're somebody who ordered it, it's probably going to happen like in the next day or 2. So I was, shall we say, impressed by the size of the box when I first walked in and saw it. You don't necessarily like get a full appreciation for how large this thing is until you walk in and see the box that it gets sent in. Mm-hmm. And so I opened it up. I did a review on my YouTube channel, and I've been messing with it a little bit. And overall, I like it. There is some engineering, like, I don't know what's going on with it in the knees where they become loose, and you don't need this thing falling over. So I'm waiting to hear
that's you definitely don't need that.
Yeah, as of right now, Hasbro hasn't addressed it, but they for sure know about it because they're the type of people that they keep a pretty open channel of communication with like their fan base. Like they've done a lot of like figure reveals with like influencers on the YouTube stuff. So like Marvel Legends people have gotten to like, I guess Marvel Legends YouTubers have gotten to like show, hey, Hasbro sent me this. It's a brand new figure. It's going to be coming out in a few months. So here's the grand unveiling of it. So they're pretty open with their audience. So it's only a matter of time before they finally address this knee thing at some point. How to go about like fixing it, I have no idea, because what is everyone going to just send their Sentinel back and get another one? Like I don't know fully what's going to happen there, but yeah, remains to be seen.
Well, I know Robo from the Fwoosh uploaded like a little hack to try and tighten up the joint just by tightening the screw in there, and he said, I don't know how well this is going to hold up. The screw might get stripped out over time, or it might shear the plastic, or all kinds of things. And so that's definitely something you don't want taking a shelf dive.
Yeah, I mean, I saw his video and I got thinking, I'm like, if there were a way, like basically just mechanically, if there were a way to disassemble that lower leg and just put it back together with like a rubber washer in between the two parts of the knee, you would get your grip way like better, and you wouldn't have to tighten the screw just like too much, because the rubber would give that friction you need in there. The problem is like this is such a elaborately built figure that like disassembling it I have no idea how I would even do it, so I'm not gonna try.
Yeah. So I will, as a non-Sentinel owner though, I will say I would be willing to give Hasbro some benefit of the doubt, just because nothing like this has ever been done before. I mentioned when I brought up the figure itself, how groundbreaking it is. Normally when a figure is above 2 feet tall, or even like a foot tall, it's just like a Jakks Pacific kids toy that is like 5 points of articulation, like that Godzilla figure that came out in 2014. This is like the first like human-sized action figure, like a legitimate action figure. So a lot of the engineering and just the physics of it, like I said, I don't own it, so I can't really, I didn't put money behind it, so my opinion and my generosity might not go as far as somebody like you or Boog or anybody else who ordered, who got the Sentinel. But I just, as a first run, maybe with Galactus, who we'll talk about later, maybe with Galactus they'll definitely get this figured out.
I would assume, yeah. Like, I mean, the learning curve is behind them now, so like they're going to be able to use the feedback from this and carry it forward. So, I mean, like I said, I'm interested to see how they address this when they finally do, because there's no way they're not hearing this, because it's a lot of people are having the same issue and being very vocal about it, which I do understand. It's not a cheap figure, and you want it to be able to stand freely without tipping over. Like, I don't have as severe of an issue with mine as I've seen other people. Now, granted, I've still only opened the one. I haven't opened the other one yet, so I don't know if the other one is better or worse or whatever the case. But, yeah, like, I'm just kind of waiting to see what they say, honestly. Overall, though, I mean, I'm glad I got it. I was planning on building some kind of a diorama piece to display it, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So for now, he's just sitting in the corner of the room, just kind of staring over everything.
Looking pretty.
Yeah.
How does he look next to the Great Ape Vegeta? Because that's a stop motion right there for you.
That's actually not a bad idea. I actually, so my roommate has the Great Ape Vegeta, so I got to appreciate it and just mess with it a little bit, and kind of wish that I bought one for myself, honestly. But I'm like, oh well, like it's just one of those big figures that I wouldn't know what I would eventually like do with it as far as displays. And I got a few of those now with that giant Mezco Kong that just kind of stands out in the living room, and now these Sentinels.
Yeah,
But,
that's I think. Oh, what was it? I think I was doing a live stream last year, and you were in the chat, and I said, "What are you going to do with it?" And you mentioned put it in the passenger seat and go into the high capacity lane.
The carpool lane, yeah. Like, you know what? I'd like to see him tell me I can't, because it's a man-sized thing sitting in the seat next to me.
Yeah, it's definitely it's an intimidating piece, and I assume it looks great.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, that leg issue aside, I really enjoy it, and I'm glad I got it. I didn't back Galactus just down to, finances and space, basically. I'm like, Galactus is cool and everything, but like as Marvel goes, I'm more of an X-Men guy than I am Fantastic Four or Avengers or any of that kind of stuff. So Galactus doesn't speak to my heart in the same way that an X-Men themed character does. But I'm happy for everybody that got in on that, because that's going to be an even larger figure with presumably more elaborate stuff going on with it. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what people think of that like next year when it opens up.
Well, that's a good segue into the Galactus. That finished up about a month ago, maybe about, if I remember correctly. I have the thing pulled up. Yeah, it was at the end of, so about 2.5 weeks ago. The campaign to fund Galactus ended, and it looked like it wasn't going to fund in the same way that Ultimate WWE Ring didn't look like it was going to get funded. Boy, were we wrong. So Galactus in the last 2 or 3 days just got uber funded. I think in the last day it got about 10,000 backers, and within the last 10 minutes I think it gained 300 backers. So it was insane how much that increase just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I mean, seeing that, anytime I see these kind of crowdfunded things, you can always pretty much count on the last day of it. Anybody who's either on the fence or just waiting for the last day to finally pull the trigger, all that is going to happen pretty quick. And I guess that's exactly what happened here with this Galactus. Because, I mean, with the Mattel thing you mentioned, the way they first pitched it didn't make sense as a crowdfunding thing. It just didn't seem like it added up. But then they added some things and made it kind of like an early backer, bonus, basically.
Yeah.
That's when I jumped on board, because I was like, all right, now it seems more worthwhile, and I'll be able to get more out of this than I would have, initially thought. And with that, they kind of forced you to make a move a little earlier if you wanted to get everything that was going to be kind of included with it. With Galactus, they didn't put that pressure on you. So it was just you get in by the end of the day today, you're going to be fine. So you had that month to, put aside the money or just decide if you wanted to get it. And looks like a lot of people went for it.
You can say that again. One thing I'm just having such a difficult time with is just how big Galactus is. I saw the Mezco Kong, the big one, at a comic shop the other week. I think I tagged you in a photo on Instagram, being like, "How do you, where do you keep this?" And that's only 18 inches tall. This is the Sentinel is a 6 inches taller than that, or actually a little more than that. And
I think Sentinel is about 26, and I think Galactus is coming in at about 30 something,
32, 33, something like that. I don't know if that's to the top of the head or to the top of the headdress crown thing, whatever he's got going on.
Yeah, I would imagine probably that, but
if it's
either
the
way,
top of his head, that's insane. So I'm I'm just more interested to see how they managed to engineer this, which is even bigger, even even more complex, and just uh, you know, I guess I'm having such a hard time like feel like getting a sense of how big they are. Like I said, I got off track talking about how big they were, but I know how big the Mezco Kong is. I know how big like an X Plus or a Hot Toys is,
Hmm.
um, but like how big is a 28-inch figure or a 32-inch figure? Yeah, sure, I
Yeah.
can just be like, oh, it's about up to my waist or about up to my thigh or something like that. But it's like, how big is it? And these size comparison photos, like you see Reed Richards or Logan or Wolverine next to the Sentinel, it's like, yeah, but how big is it? And then in your review, you literally put the Sentinel hand inside your hand. And it's like, yeah, the hand's literally just like fits perfectly in the palm of my hand. It's like, oh, that's a pretty big figure.
Yeah, they you definitely get a full appreciation because there is some disconnect. Like until you see it in person, you don't fully appreciate it. And so like I tried in my video, I tried to put him in front of like regular Marvel Legends, and then I tried to put him in front of like the previous Sentinel from like the Toy Biz like Build a Figure,
Mm-hmm.
and he's basically like twice the size of that one. And it's like, so if you got this and this is not a small figure to try and put in a display somewhere, you're now going to be looking at something that's like twice the size, and just make sure you're aware of that. But yeah, like seeing it in person, that's kind of when I first realized, like, oh wow, this is really like as big as I thought it was going to be, and now it's definitely like the fears I had of like, what am I going to do with this, have all come true. I'm like, where is it going?
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing with Biolante, in uh, like reviews of it, and they do the size comparisons. Like, this is how Biolante is next to Godzilla and Mechagodzilla and Destroya. And it's like, okay, yeah, but how big is it? Like, Biolante,
Hmm.
yes, she's big, like height wise, but she's also like depth wise. She takes up a lot of space, and not only that, with the vines and the tentacles and the tendrils,
Yeah,
she takes up a lot of real estate. And the first time I opened her, I was like, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. And
I think, yeah,
it's really cool.
that was your video that I think I saw where you like, I don't know if I've just maybe never seen a Biolante like review or anything, but like when you turn to like the side profile, I was like, wow, that I never considered that it's just going to be that like deep too. Like not even just tall and wide, but like when you spin it to the side, you're like, oh, that's like a full, like it goes back farther than I ever realized too.
It's a full figure back.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the Sentinel and presumably Galactus. Um, it's a very, you got to see it to understand how big it is.
Yeah. Now suddenly like seeing that, I'm like, I understand why Biolante is like the cost that it is, because just the amount of plastic, the amount of space that it's going to take up, and the amount of like detail that they had to do to all of that. It's not just like a front on only thing. Like it's a full,
Yeah,
you know,
it's not
fully
a
in
cardboard
depth
cutout.
thing. Yeah.
If it were, I'd be very, very mad.
Right. Like,
So I'm just interested to see what you do with that Sentinel cap, because I've just looking at the review, moving that thing is not easy. Balancing it won't be easy, and just the size of it. You mentioned that in one of your recent live streams that your city background or alley background diorama that you've been using for the last few videos just isn't tall enough. It's the Sentinel is at or right around the same height as your backdrop, so it's
yeah.
it's. I don't envy any attempted animation you take on with that figure.
Yeah. I mean, like I have some ideas for like a diorama or a display or something like that. But as far as animation goes, I'm like, I'm gonna have to start from square one if I want to do something with this.
I think you should probably do some green screen. I think that might work best.
It
Uh,
probably would. Yeah.
keying that in. I think that might be the best way to go. But who knows? Like I said, I don't own it. Who knows? Maybe in a month after you pose it, it just is the best figure for animated you can think of.
It's definitely got a lot of options. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge one day.
One day, hopefully we'll see it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next up, we have Storm Collectibles. Storm Collectibles has been a little. It's been keeping its head low recently, I think, with some of its reveals, or at least with the Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter line, which are the ones that you collect mostly. And I look at vicariously and enjoy from a distance with the occasional like toe dipping with Ermac, and I actually just got the MK3 Scorpion, the new version with like the fitted gi.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a good figure. I think I like it a little bit more. At least that's design for the ninjas. I think I like it a little bit more than the original. I think I just like that fitted gi look to it. I think it makes them look a lot bigger and like buffer.
Yeah, I mean they did increase the scale of the figures a little bit at that point too, but like they upgraded the engineering of the figure itself too. So like there's less of the ball joints and more of like the hinges and that kind of stuff. So I think over time that figure is probably going to like hold up better too, which I always appreciate.
Mm-hmm. So, but their most recent reveal was Reptile, which is a Storm repaint, which they are known to love. But I think it looks pretty good. They do have a different designed mask. It looks like it has a defined cheekbone. In the profile or in the promo pics, I'm not sure if you've looked at it that closely, Cap.
Yeah.
But looking at it, it has a definite cheekbone to it, which I like. But the head I'm probably gonna put on, because I have this pre-ordered, is the Reptile head, which looks really, really good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like the mask, the MK3 like Ultimate Scorpion and Sub-Zero, like their masks, I wasn't as big a fan of, so I was happy when they changed it for Reptile, and like it actually matches kind of like the in-game character select artwork for Reptile and Ultimate MK3. So that's like with the more like defined cheekbones and stuff, I think that's an improvement over what we've gotten previously. And I did like that they kind of went back and included the Reptile head again too, with like you could have it with or without kind of like the ninja hood on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because my original Reptile, like he's having a hard time standing up, just down to the fact that I think there's some engineering issue with the original ninjas where like over time the ball joints kind of like become loose. Mm-hmm. And so I've done like animations with those, so it's constantly like moving them around, and it's like, oh man, he's had a rough day. So it'll be nice to have a Reptile that can like stand up.
Just stand up.
Yep.
But with this one, it comes with an acid spitting effect for the reptile mouth, as well as the tongue, and what's called the description. I'm looking on Big Bad right now. It's described as a force ball effect. It's that it's that projectile that he shoots out. So it's definitely very Storm Collectibles-y with all the interchangeable parts and accessories and just kind of how committed they are to actually like making the fatalities work with a physical figure. Sector's a great example of that with his like compressor.
Yeah, he's got that whole like compactor thing like that you can just snap onto him. That's the one thing I'll give Storm. Like they include a lot of accessories and bloody props and different things so that you can really make it feel like Mortal Kombat. You could have them just standing around and they look great, or you could actually have them like ripping each other apart and have to explain that when people come over. But it's it's great. I love it. Apart from Reptile, like they also have Kintaro and Kung Lao that I've got pre-ordered. So those will be cool. Those are two brand new figures to the line, not just like a new version of somebody else. So that's the one thing that Storm, I don't want to say they don't do it as often, but like it takes them a while to like introduce brand new characters that aren't just like a redo of somebody else. So I'm going to be happy when those come out.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Kintaro. He looks great. I don't have the original Goro, which I know has some problems, specifically in the ankles.
Yeah.
As you and Zombie and tons of other people have made mention of. So,
Yep.
just looking at some of the promo pics, he doesn't look to move his ankles all that much. Scratch that. Oh, he's got a really good ankle pivot. Let's see if I can send you this image over Discord. You know, he's got a pretty good ankle pivot there in that.
Oh yeah, they're showing off now. They're like, we got it. We figured it out.
So, watching this come out eventually, you know, I'm excited to cordially see how this turns out. I'm expecting review cap.
Oh, that'll probably happen. And now, as I'm looking at that, I'm like, they're probably going to get a 2.0 Goro out of this too, because it corrects all the issues of the first Goro. So, yeah, but like Kintaro's just an interesting enough character where he just visually is like very striking, and I'm just a big fan of like all these Mortal Kombat classic characters. So yeah, he's definitely happening. I'm excited.
Yeah, and one thing I love about Storm Collectibles is that they have a lot of compatibility with other figures in the line. So Ermac, he has the arms that you can, the torn off arms that you can put onto other figures. And Kintaro, he has frozen arms for the unmasked Sub-Zero, as well as a split head, which looks awesome, and just a bunch of different like just blood and gore effects that you can have other figures holding and fatalitying just other characters on yourself. And Storm is really good at cross-line compatibility, basically.
Yeah, they basically like strong arm you into like having to buy all of the characters. They're like, yeah, but if you want the ice arms for your Sub-Zero for Mortal Kombat 3, then you have to buy Mortal Kombat 2 Kintaro. Like, all right. I mean, I was going to anyway. It's a strange business move, but I'll end up with cool Sub-Zero arms, so that's even better.
Yeah, and this just looks like a really good figure. So I'm definitely looking forward to people's reviews of it because, like I said, it looks impressive. And then Kung Lao, you mentioned, he's kind of he is a new character to the line, but he looks just a bit on the bland side a little bit, at least to me. He's not very packed in with accessories. He's just got his hat, a swooshing effect, a rabbit, and what looks like a slight blood effect.
Yeah, he's like kind of one of the more basic figures. Like, they went with like an MK2 design, which is like kind of a more plain, like kind of traditional, like martial arts monk look, I guess. But I like it. I mean, overall, it's just what Kung Lao looks like. So it's kind of an easy thing for them to do. I'd be interested. Like, I know he's got the different faces and all the different posing options for like hands and everything too. So like, you'll be able to get him looking good, especially with like the hat and like the effects and stuff he comes with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not quite. I'm probably not going to get Kung Lao, but I might just stick with the ninjas because they look really good. Not to say Kung Lao doesn't, but this just doesn't interest me as much.
Yeah, I hear you.
Now this, we haven't seen anything come from this yet, but Storm Collectibles announced that they were doing some figures from the 2021 movie that just came out. So how far into that line, if at all, are you going to get into that?
Not far, I don't think. Basically, the only way that I would like really be super interested in any of it is if there's not already like a video game equivalent. So if they make a figure of like Sonya, for example, who they just don't have in the video game line, I might go for that. But yeah, I don't know. Like I wasn't in love with the movie designs enough to like spend that kind of money on the figures.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll probably end up missing most of those, I think.
Okay. See, I really like the designs, so I think I might get at least Sub-Zero and Scorpion should they look good. Just because that's kind of like a classic Godzilla versus Kong. You know, those are the two like titular characters that you gotta have them fighting each other.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's definitely those two are a probability. I'm not sure about getting a whole assortment, getting a whole line.
Yeah, it's a lot to commit to.
Exactly. Well, that finishes up Storm. Now these are figures. I just want to talk about the NECA Kong with you because you and I are both massive fans of this figure.
Yes.
Any version you want to pick, whether it's the original or the New York Jungle King or whatever it's called, and then the Skull Island Jungle King, whatever it's called, are all just really, really, really good figures. Just especially for $30.
Yeah, I mean, I went back and I double dipped on both of those, the New York and the Skull Island versions, even though it's the same figure with different accessories. I wasn't going to be able to live with myself not having both. So, yeah, really good. I opened the jungle one already. I haven't opened the New York one yet, but
That's
everything
your
looks
depression
great.
Pile.
That's in my depression pile. Yeah, he's over here. I got my yeah. He's got like the airplane and like the shackles and everything too, which all look really nice. So one day when I just have a big opening party, he'll come out.
Yeah, I think the plane kind of makes me want to go and get like one or two more of the New York version, so I can have the whole squadron of those 1930s like biplane or bi-wing planes, whatever they're called.
Yeah, I mean, from what I could see, it looks really well detailed, and like it would be cool if like it would almost make me want to like build an Empire State Building or something just to have him standing there, which is an idea I've kind of had going as far back as the Peter Jackson Monster Arts Kong. Like, I'm like, I want to do something with him, put him somewhere, but right now he's kind of standing in front of like some giant McFarlane like tree that he fits surprisingly well in front of, and like he looks cool. So I just haven't had the need to like change that around yet.
Mm-hmm.
But these planes might be an excuse.
Oh, absolutely. I think that would look really, really cool. Although I don't know how a whole Empire State Building would look. Maybe just the spire.
Yeah, like it would just be the top part that you see in the original movie. Probably not too much more than that.
If you did, man, that'd be great. So one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have, though, is that this just doesn't scale well with anything, especially Godzilla related. You know, the Monster Arts is 54 is too small, and I think most people would pair this with the 54 because at least the 33 style heads are just so great, both the movable jaw and the static one, and even to the other NECA Godzillas. Like I only have. The last one I got was the 62, so the 70 or 64 and the newer ones I just haven't got. So I have a lot of the smaller ones, but even then, like he's like head and shoulders taller than all of them.
Yeah, like I think the largest one that I have is probably the Tokyo SOS Godzilla. Like he's probably the stockiest and maybe the tallest, and Kong is still like dwarfing him. So. Yeah, it was kind of an unusual move, I think, to make Kong like in the scale they did. It doesn't affect like my overall enjoyment of the figure, but anybody that's looking to like pair him up with anybody, like as far as like other kaiju, you're gonna have a hard time with it if you want the scale to be right.
Yeah, it's like you said, it doesn't affect any enjoyment I have of the figure because it's just so well done.
I agree. I mean, I've been animating with it and having a great time. I think it looks great on camera. I know you did some animation with it as well recently.
Hmm.
And yeah, how did it hold up for you?
No, it worked amazingly well. I was switching between the roaring head from the original release and the like growling head from these like Jungle King repacks or reissues.
Yeah, you went with like the more stylized heads as
Yeah,
opposed to like the movie ones. But
yeah.
I mean, they do look good interchanging back and forth. So like,
And
I
there's
do
a couple
appreciate
of
the
decent.
options.
Yeah, I think it looked pretty good, to be honest. There are a couple of detailing issues like scars and scars being on this on one head sculpt and not being on another. There's
Hmm.
just some minor um, continuity, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, just that 20-second clip I did for uh, Donnie Flip's contest. Um, it worked really well for that. So I'm really glad I used it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a sturdy enough figure to like he pretty much holds his pose, which is nice. So like he's not gonna like wobble or anything when you get him where you need him to be.
Exactly. He's a hefty figure. He is a NECA figure too, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
And he didn't break out a package too, which is also a NECA trope.
yeah. NECA has gotten much better with that. There was a time 5 or 6 years ago or whatever where it was like that was almost a foregone conclusion that if you open a NECA figure, it's gonna like shatter and fall apart. But thankfully, hasn't been that way with Kong. Any of the Kongs I've opened.
Yeah. I mean, at the place where I saw that Mezco Kong, they had I bought one of the NECA Dr. Zaius figures from Planet of the Apes because those are just such great movies, and Dr. Zaius is such a great character. But it's a 7-year-old figure, and look, it did have a like 3.5 hour sun tanning session in the car, so it definitely loosened up. But I mean, even that worked. Even that, moves perfectly fine.
Nice, yeah.
So, let's see. We can move on to Mezco now. Because I mean, I don't really do anything with TMNT. I don't have any TMNT, so I can't contribute to the abundance of NECA TMNT figures that have come out. I'm just watching your videos, your reviews of certain 2-packs and dioramas you've made, and they've all looked incredible with the figures and the dios. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the figures I've had good luck with mine as far as like none of them have broken and like none of that kind of stuff is happening. And like they're at the point now where the characters they're releasing are like C and D list characters because they got all the main ones out already. And I'm like I always have that conversation with myself like I could stop now and be happy, be content. But I know that's just a lie. As soon as I go in the store and I see it, I'm going to buy it. So, yeah, I'm going to keep going, probably.
yeah, they suck you in. They definitely do.
I got a couple yet that are still, once again, like I just haven't opened them yet because I don't have a place to really like set them up. So I got to figure all that out.
I mean, you have a whole just shelf dedicated to the NECA figures. You have your Technodrome and your sewer dioramas. I mean, you just have a monolith of just TMNT in the lab.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it to be that way either. But like, I don't know. I got sucked in. I got pulled right in farther and deeper than I ever expected to, as far as like getting into this line. So that's my next thing is like kind of organizing it, maybe getting rid of some of the packaging I don't need, and like making more room for more of the figures to actually be set up.
Oh yeah, because there's the movie figures as well.
Yeah, like I had them displayed for a long time, and I eventually ended up having to box them up and put them in the closet because I'm like, I just don't have room right now. So, little by little, I'm constantly like a work in progress with like what I display and what stays on the shelves and what gets switched out. Like it's always a thing. Keeps me busy, I guess.
Yeah, organizing shelves is always it's a never-ending process.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was one more figure that got revealed like 2 or 3 days ago. The likelihood of me getting it is 0, and it might be the same for you. But that massive Mezco Godzilla.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
That 18-inch Biollante Godzilla figure with like 10 movable joints and light ups and realistic eyes, because that's such a
realistic plastic eyes, yeah, that's a selling point.
absolutely. I think I'll spend the money just for that. I can only vouch for myself not getting it, but are you gonna get that?
No, I'm not. Like my main thing with that is like seeing the price at like 450. I was like, I know there are like Mezco like loyalists, and even them, I think is like those people might have like a hard time coming up with that money like for what they're getting. I just don't know if it seems worth it. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody's looking at it and thinking it's exactly what they want, but like my main question is like, who is this for? Because anybody who's going to spend 450 on something like that is probably already doing it with like X Plus, and they're probably already getting their fill of Godzilla merchandise like at that scale, at that level of detail from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Or
probably just put it into Galactus.
Yeah, that could be true too. Like, yeah, I don't know who's going for it. I'm not going to say it looks bad because I don't think it does, but I just don't know. Like, I don't know what they're doing with it, basically.
Mm-hmm. I would like to see them try to do one of their 1/12 figures or Godzilla in their 1/12 line, because what are they called? They're called Micromans or Micronauts. I can't remember. But it's these little like posable figures that you can put inside the Godzilla's like little rubber Godzilla suits and basically have suit actors in them. But
yeah,
they're not posable in the least. So I would be interested to see a Mezco 1/12 Godzilla with like a seamless body, and eventually release, unlike that Batman that also has a seamless body.
Yeah, still waiting. Yeah, it's a seamless transition between never coming out and not existing.
So it's I'd like to see that from Mezco as opposed to a $450 nightlight.
Yeah, basically. Like, I'm curious. Like, I'm gonna kind of keep track of it and see who's buying this and what they think of it when they get it. I'm also curious because I know Super 7 has the Godzilla license, so whatever they bring to the table, I'm definitely.
They had that, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, Super 7's not afraid to spend money on the licenses too, so like, there's a good chance that they might beat Monster Arts to an Anguirus or like an old school like Jet Jaguar or like Megalon or like some of the characters that we don't have from other from like Monster Arts or anything, or NECA. So I'm curious. I'm pretty. I pretty much enjoy all the Super 7 stuff I've seen. It's it's in its own style, so hopefully it's not too much of a clash with the styles that we've already got. But either way, I'm curious.
Yeah, so I totally forgot Super 7 even had the license, so you just blew my mind right there. But yeah, but with this, I can't see anybody aside from maybe, like, even with X Plus collectors, they have that gigantic series 89 already came out like 2 or 3 years ago. So there's the market for 18-inch like Bio Goji has already been filled, like by a company that's definitely proven itself as the undisputed champion of just oversized Godzilla figures.
Yeah, I mean, are they thinking that like they're going to catch the market of people who missed that figure and maybe are willing to spend the money on it? I guess we'll see. Remains to be seen right now.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's what if that's the market they're trying to capture. So I guess it just remains to be seen. So that's all the topics I have. If you have anything else you want to discuss, either figure wish lists or just want to end it here.
I mean, I got a few more minutes. I could talk about how much I want Final Fight to happen for Storm Collectibles, because I'll take every opportunity ever to talk about why they should do that. But I mean, I know they would nail it. I know they do a great job with all the characters. And I also know that they would have a built-in audience because there's so much crossover for their Street Fighter line that like a lot of the Final Fight characters have showed up in Street Fighter games over the years. So it would just make perfect sense. I'm hoping one day they hear my cries.
Well, then we'd get a new Hagar figure. You'd get a new Hagar figure, and then we'd finally get Aftermath 2.
I get a Hagar figure that I didn't have to make myself. So like the world can finally buy all the Hagar they want. And if they do that, Aftermath 2 is it's a much greater possibility.
Well, Cap, I would like to thank you for taking just under 3 hours of your day to talk to me and discuss movies and action figures. So go ahead and plug everything else again.
Yeah, man, that was fun. I am at Captain McKay on Instagram. My YouTube is Captain McKay Random. Like we said before, it's all about action figures. It's all about animation and building dioramas and displays and just talking about the fun stuff that comes along with this hobby. So there's a little of everything. As far as animation goes, there's wrestling and superheroes and, of course, Godzilla, Mortal Kombat, the stuff we discussed here today. There's going to be a bit of that on my channel as well. So feel free to check it out if that's your thing.
All right. Thanks to everybody that made it this far. I bet 3 of you did. And we'll see you on the hopefully inevitable comeback of the KaiMoCast whenever that happens. All right. See you, everybody.